Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. Pirates of the Navy Thunder God. Chapter 81 The Long Sword Thundercloud. You don't even know Hughes Moore. In the largest office on the warship, Ron looked at the Flying Squirrel in surprise. He came to Flying Squirrel to gather information. Ron only knew the famous swords in the One Piece world, the ones in Zoro's hands and Mihawk's black sword Nightblade. He had no idea about the thunder sword that he pulled out of the giant snake's heart. However, after thinking for a long time, the Flying Squirrel still couldn't remember who the thunder swordsman Hughes Moore was. As a veteran who has been roaming the seas for decades, both his age and experience are there. The Flying Squirrel has enough confidence to say, if even he doesn't know, then he definitely can't be a figure in the last 100 years. Before being sealed, the Hell Island crab had always been an ordinary island. No one knew how long it had existed, and no one knew how long the white snake had lived on the island. Time was unpredictable. Perhaps only after returning to the headquarters could we find clues from the dusty old materials. However, although he didn't know who Hughes Moore was, he recognized the sword in front of him. He picked up the 1.3-meter-long straight sword from the table, and slowly slid his fingers across the mirror-like bright blade, feeling the fierce counterattack of the violent lightning, with deep envy in his eyes. One of the supreme swords in the past, the Long Sword, Thunder Cloud. Ron's eyes widened instantly. Supreme Great Sword. There are only 12 supreme great swords in the world. What the hell? Or is it going to be so explosive? It was once. The Flying Squirrel glared at Ron with disdain. The swordsman's love for the sword was not limited to pirates or the navy. Although it was once the supreme sword, it was also a rare divine weapon. However, it ended up in the hands of Ron, a guy whose fists moved faster than his brains. If he wasn't thin-skinned and afraid of rumors spreading that the lieutenant general of our unit had snatched the spoils of war from the new recruits, thus ruining his reputation, the Flying Squirrel would have snatched them from him without a second thought. Once. Ron frowned slightly. Is there something hidden? It's not a secret, it's just a story that many people know. The Flying Squirrel put the thundercloud back on the table, looked at the extra charcoal marks on the tabletop, and sighed. The reason why I can recognize it at a glance is not only because it was once listed as one of the 12 supreme swords, but also because it is the only supreme sword that has been broken. Broken. Seeing Ron's suspicious face, the Flying Squirrel rolled his eyes at him unhappily. No matter how sharp and strong a weapon is, it has its limit. If someone is determined to destroy it, the same goes for the supreme sword. The Flying Squirrel couldn't tell exactly whether this story happened hundreds of years ago. There are hundreds of versions circulating among the people now, and the nursery rhymes they make up are different, so the truth is completely impossible to find out. But although there are thousands of different stories, the trend is the same and can be basically summarized into 4 processes: swordsman, dragon slaying, regret, and sword breaking. In the Flying Squirrel's memory, this is the story he knew. A long time ago, a swordsman from the West Sea found a country where the legendary dragons lived on the Grand Line. Facing the legendary creature, the dragon, the swordsman wanted to become a dragon-slaying swordsman, just like his predecessors, descendants, and ancestors. But the swordsman did not kill, he let go of all the dragons that fell under his sword, just wanting to fight with the strongest dragon king. Later, he passed the test of the 5-colored dragon, climbed up the Thunder Holy Mountain at the core of the Dragon Kingdom, and fought a desperate battle with the Dragon King who protected this kingdom. The final result is of course that the swordsman wins, but when the Dragon King falls, the entire Dragon Kingdom suddenly begins to collapse. Volcanoes erupt, dark clouds gather, and doomsday befalls this land. The swordsman then realizes what he has done. The Dragon King is the pillar of this kingdom. If he kills the Dragon King, the dragon race will soon come to an end. Because of his competitive and strong heart, he caused the terrible consequence of the extinction of an entire race. The kind-hearted swordsman was too ashamed to face the tragedy he had caused with his own hands and was ready to die to atone for his sin. However, the dying Dragon King stopped him and inlaid the thunder gem, the source of his power, into the hilt of the sword, asking the swordsman to protect the world after the dragon disappeared. The swordsman agreed, took the new sword, and returned to the West Sea to punish the evildoers and atone for his mistakes. The long sword, Leun, got its name from this. De means the first knot, and it is named Dalong because it made a contract with the dragon. Leun is the power bestowed on the Dalong sword by the thunder gem, which controls the power of thunder and lightning. During the years when the swordsman was active, Leun was the undisputed supreme sword. Time flies, the years are like a shuttle. Decades passed in the blink of an eye, and the swordsman was old and weak. Before he died, he locked himself in his room, refusing to eat or drink. When his family found something wrong and broke into the room, the swordsman had been dead for many days. Beside him was the broken Dalong sword and a suicide note. The suicide note recorded what the swordsman saw and heard in the Dragon Kingdom, and also told the world why he hated evil so much and could not tolerate any evil in his eyes. To paraphrase the swordsman, the Dalong sword seemed glorious, but it was actually a sin. With his death, this sin should not be inherited by his descendants, so he spent several months and personally broke the sword that accompanied him throughout his life. The current Dalong sword was recast by the legendary master craftsman from Blacksmith Island 300 years ago using meteorite iron. Although there are no visible cracks on the surface, any qualified swordsman can feel the inconsistency inside the Dalong sword. It is no longer qualified to be called the Supreme Great Sword. At this point, the Flying Squirrel sighed. Whether the story of the Dragon Kingdom is true or not is another matter. After all, I only heard one version. But the fact that the Dalong sword was broken and recast is well documented, and it is irrefutable evidence. So the current Dalong sword is neither one of the 12 great swords nor one of the 21 great swords. It is a well-known but forgotten sword. The Forgotten Sword. Ron nodded, holding the thundercloud. He discovered the abnormality of the thundercloud at the beginning. There was a gap hidden inside the sword between the front 50 centimeters and the back 80 centimeters. He was not a qualified swordsman, but a user of the thunder fruit, who had an observation ability of lightning that ordinary people could not match. Looking at Ron's thoughtful expression, the flying squirrel felt very uncomfortable. As a forgotten magic weapon, it is also a kind of fate for it to fall into the hands of someone like you who is not a swordsman. Ron. Can we be more tactful? However, the thundercloud and his thunder fruit can work perfectly together. Because of the power of the thunder gem, Ron does not have to worry about burning the sword while releasing lightning, which makes up for his lack of weapons. For fruit ability users, it is still very important to have a weapon. After all, if one day his lightning power is restrained by something strange, he is not a completely toothless tiger relying on the thundercloud. After all, not all natural types can condense the intangible light particles like Kizaru and create the sky cloud sword that can fight Rayleigh. The lightning sword made by the thunder fruit is more like a high-pressure water gun. It has amazing cutting power, but it cannot be used as a real weapon. Just get out of here after asking. Treat it well, even if you are not a swordsman. The flying squirrel waved his hand and began to chase people away in a melancholy manner. He also wants this kind of magical weapon. I have been stationed on the island for so long and have dealt with the white snake countless times, but I didn't even notice any thunderclouds. Thinking of this flying squirrel, my heart aches. This is fate. Just turn a blind eye to it. Ron. If you dare to use your armed color domineering aura, I will beat you to death. But before pushing open the door, Ron suddenly turned around and asked, by the way, Vice Admiral Flying Squirrel, since you are responsible for the development of Hell Island, do you know that there is a white snake on the island that can use armament haki? Oh? You met it. A gleam of light flashed in the flying squirrel's eyes, and he remembered what Dongt and others had told everyone before, about Ron's battle in the center of the basin. The opponent at that time seemed to be a white snake. The answer to why Ron asked this question is very obvious. In response to this, the flying squirrel's depressed mood suddenly became wonderful. He leaned back on the chair, crossed his legs, and said with a smile, "How is it? Is the armament haki I taught you strong enough?" "It's you." Ron was furious and pulled out the thundercloud. "Die, you bastard!" Chapter 82 Return to CP0. Wish everyone a prosperous Mid-Autumn Festival. Although armament haki is a natural power that exists in every living organism, how to activate and develop it is more difficult than developing potential beyond the limits of the body, and it requires a very strong physical support, otherwise it is tantamount to suicide. Although Zephyr could not teach, he could still tell Ron some of his experiences. There was once a naval colonel who forcibly awakened the armament haki, but because his body could not keep up, he died within a few months. When he died, he was just skin and bones. The terrible pressure supporting the armament haki drained his energy. Because it needs the support of the physical strength, the white snake naturally cannot say that it is born with armament haki. That is an impossible phenomenon. It is almost the same to be born with observation haki. And the animals wanting to awaken armament haki on their own is nothing but a foolish dream. They don't even know what armament haki is, so how can they awaken it? That is something that hundreds of millions of humans in the 4 seas and the first half of the Grand Line have not done. So the answer is very obvious here: the white snake's domineering nature was deliberately taught by someone. And this person is the flying squirrel. When Hell Island was designated as a survival training site, during the development period, during an inspection of the island, the flying squirrel discovered a white snake that could spit lightning and imitated the movements of the 6 styles and shaving to hunt. At that time, the war had just ended, and the creatures on the island had not been completely killed. There were always Navy soldiers staying on Hell Island, and there were many people who could use the 6 styles. It was estimated that they took the opportunity to steal and learn it. Such a smart beast is rare even in this one-piece world. The flying squirrel was curious for a moment, so he took advantage of his time to train it carefully. Every time the white snake attacked him, he would not kill it, and then he would continue to show it his moves to see what else it could learn. The result was beyond the flying squirrel's expectation. The white snake had learned nothing except a little talent in shaving. On the contrary, the armed color domineering that he had never thought of was actually activated in the process. The flying squirrel was so surprised that he could fit his fist in his mouth. Although awakening armament haki is mostly achieved by getting beaten, your approach is a bit unreasonable. Fearing that the white snake would grow into a real monster and endanger the survival of the new recruits, the flying squirrel reported the matter to Jean Guo and asked him whether to kill or keep it. Jean Guo considered carefully and did not order the removal of the white snake. After all, for the new recruits, Hell Island was full of dangers. One more or one less would not be too much. The threat of a non-mad white snake was less than that of a volcanic eruption. Moreover, the ordinary new recruits might not be able to defeat the ordinary beast kings they captured to supplement the number of ice-field and tropical jungle beasts. It was impossible for them to go deep into the central basin, so they simply left it alone. At the same time, Jean Guo also has some little ideas. Maybe one day in the future, a monster newcomer who is comparable to the current 3 admirals will appear in the navy again, and the existence of the white snake can also be used as training material. So, more than 10 years later, relying on the armed color domineering, shaving, lightning spitting, and its own powerful muscle strength, this white snake became the king of the island, occupied the fertile land in the center of the island, and became the well-deserved king of Hell Island. Ron didn't deserve to be hit by the tail. The white snake's tail swing was a super high-speed swing formed by the shaving force technique and the armed color domineering. But when Ron thought about how miserable he was and how it was all because of the purple potato head in front of him, he gritted his teeth in hatred. Half a month later, the warship finally returned to the Navy headquarters via the Gate of Justice. Looking at the magnificent white building in front of them, everyone on the warship seemed to be in another world. This trip to Hell Island was unforgettable for everyone on the warship, especially the new recruits. The vastness and depth of the sea is far from as simple as what is written in books. Reading thousands of books is not as good as traveling thousands of miles. Looking at the word justice written in black dye on the front of the fortress, most of the new recruits felt a lump in their throats and burst into tears. Finally home. We're home. Wow, wow, I miss you, father and mother. They crawled back from hell. Come on, everyone, pay attention. It's no use crying like that. Stand still and line up. The flying squirrel's scolding came from behind, and the recruits shuddered and stood still. Originally, the flying squirrel was an amiable elder in their minds. Although he was a little serious, he was warm to the soldiers. However, when the powerful monster Ron in their minds was beaten up by the flying squirrel, the new soldiers suddenly remembered that this was a veteran who had experienced the Pirate King era 20 years ago and his strength was unfathomable. His previous playful smile was suddenly replaced by awe, and he became as obedient as a grandson. Ron felt very aggrieved when talking about this matter. If it were any other open field, the flying squirrel would not be able to pin him down, and if it couldn't defeat him, it could just run away. But in the doldrums, on the warship, in that small area, Ron couldn't fight freely. The destructive power of the thunder fruit was unquestionable, and if he wasn't careful, the ship would be destroyed and everyone would die, including himself. While his movements were restricted, the flying squirrel was full of energy. As a swordsman, he was best at close combat. The 2+1- made Ron jump up and down, and he could only rely on teleportation to avoid the blade that was close to his face again and again. Ron deeply believes that the flying squirrel is just jealous because it can't eat the grapes. Since it was he who found the thundercloud, it is waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. At the Bay port, a large group of naval generals led by Jean Guo greeted them. Not only because they suffered heavy losses in the beast tide, but also because the officers who cared about their family members gathered together. Moreover, because the Hell Island crab was completely killed and returned with a stunning achievement, the Navy valued military achievements the most, so it was understandable that the warring states were so serious. Seeing Ron standing at the front of the recruit line behind the flying squirrel, holding the walnut-shaped core in his hand, Cap laughed out loud. "You're really good, Ron. You killed all the Hell Island crabs, which is something none of us could do." Ron rolled his eyes, haha. Zephyr stood beside Garp with a dark face. The loss of 7 recruits was like 7 cuts in his heart. With such a serious loss, Zephyr hadn't smiled for a long time. But when he saw Ron, he forced his face to twitch and nodded with a smile. Vice Admiral he also came and smiled at Ron. What surprised Ron was that the captured Golden Week girl was hiding timidly behind the crane, like a shy girl leaning on her grandmother. Judging from the indifferent attitude of the people around her, this situation should have been going on for some time. What's going on? Has Golden Week, a senior executive of Baroque Works, been cleared of corruption? On the deck below, while the Flying Squirrel and Warring States were going through the process of encouragement and complimenting each other, Ron asked Garp quietly. In response, Garp took out a donut from the oil paper bag and took a bite. Now she is not Miss Golden Week, a senior executive of Baroque Works, but Tsuruchan's new adopted daughter Dora. Puff. Ron turned his head, looking confused. Although his coming to this world has changed a lot of things, the lightning stimulation device has caused an explosive growth in the mid-range combat power of the Navy and the world government, and Mr. 3, who was alive and well in the original work, died a violent death, destroying Crocodile's evil plan, but compared with this incident, it is really nothing. That's Baroque Works. Isn't Vice Admiral Tsuru afraid that the world government will have objections if he adopts her as his daughter? What can they say? Garp rolled his eyes in disdain. You're going to kill an ordinary little girl whose evil thoughts were washed away by Tsuru-chan? I'll beat up anyone who objects to this. Ron gave a thumbs up. You are awesome. He is worthy of being the Navy's Iron Fist. Garp. To have a subordinate as respectful as him is unique to Scorpion. But in terms of the Golden Week? No, Dora's talent is indeed worthy of the Navy's training. Although she is not a fruit ability user, she can exert an effect comparable to that of a fruit ability user. The word painting talent of controlling other people's emotions through the color palette is terrifying. It's just that her frontal combat ability is a little weak. An ordinary person with a gun can kill her. However, it is just right to hand her over to Vice Admiral Tsuru, who makes a living by his brain, to discipline her. There is no way. After all, would the other 3 old bastards raise a daughter? Should I tie it to a hot air balloon or throw it into the abyss of the canyon? Ron was too lazy to inquire about the secret affairs between Garp and Crane Zhang. At this moment, Marshal Sengoku called him over because a tall man in a white suit walked out from behind him. White suits are very common in the Navy, and most generals like this color. They usually wear a suit with a cloak of justice. But this man is different. His cloak does not have the word justice on it, but a unique cross with 5 black balls connected by black lines. He also wears a weird owl mask on his face, which he does not take off even in such occasions. This outfit. Ron frowned silently, directly under the Celestial Dragons, CP0. Full name, Cypher Paul No Zero. Chapter 83 The most humble person is invincible. Ron, this is a special commissioner from the world government. He is here to verify the authenticity of the Hell Island Crab Core. Zhang Guo explained to Ron at the right time. The survival of the Hell Island Crab is related to the safety of the world. Although the so-called world safety is just like New York in American cartoons, it will explode for no reason, but it is indeed very important. Therefore, verifying the authenticity is also very important and must not be taken lightly. The flying squirrel had a grim look on his face. He knew that this was a normal procedure as it was a serious matter, but the feeling of being questioned still made him uncomfortable. His group of people had a narrow escape, and it was all thanks to Ron's incredible luck that they had escaped, but now they had to undergo an investigation. This would be unpleasant for anyone. Moreover, according to the normal process, the core of the inspection should be the responsibility of the Navy itself, and then report it, but CP0 intervened, and his purpose was self-evident. However, the calm flying squirrel would not express his dissatisfaction in front of CP0. He would just stand aside coldly, watching from the sidelines. After Zhang Guo finished speaking, he smacked his lips and was a little speechless. The air suddenly became silent. He knew very well why CP0 came. The Navy had been making big moves in the past 6 months, causing the CP organization, an intelligence agency under the world government, to feel a sense of crisis. Look what they did. The development and use of the lightning stimulation instrument brought great honor to the 5 elders, and all those involved, from Zhang Guo to Ron, were repeatedly praised by the 5 elders. Putting aside the tricks that Baroque works left within the world government, in the matter of Flower City, the 5 elders refused to give in despite a joint petition from Cobra and other member states, allowing the Navy to successfully wipe out 2 senior executives of Baroque Works, which showed their favoritism towards the Navy. And now, the Hell Island Crab that was powerful enough to destroy the world died at the hands of the Navy, which was another great achievement. As a result, the CP organization could no longer sit still. Everything has been done by your Navy. If you continue like this, the 5 elders will only see the Navy and not their CP. What is the point of a CP organization that has lost its value? It is no exaggeration to say that it is a matter of life and death. But the Navy has done a great job, even the East Factory, which is independent of the Navy, directly under the world government, and has a direct line to the heavens. No, the CP organization would not dare to trip up the Navy under the wrath of the 5 elders. And if we really talk about status, the director of an ordinary CP branch is not as high-ranking as an admiral, not to mention the higher-ranking warring states. So they thought about it and asked for the legendary Cypher Paul No. 0, who was of a high status, to give the Navy a warning under the pretext of checking the authenticity of the core, telling them not to think they can do whatever they want just because they have made contributions. The CP organization is very mysterious in the sea. As a spy agency under the world government, most forces have been beaten to a pulp and can only find out the existence of CP1 to CP8. But in fact, the CP organization also has a mysterious CP9 branch and the legendary CP0, which is the real trump card of the CP organization. There's no need to mention the former. That idiot Spatum sent Rob Lucci and the others to lurk in Water 7 when they were young and needed training and growth the most. They were away for 5 or 6 years, wasting a lot of good time. As a result, CP9, which could have established a base in the big whirlpool iron triangle of Judicial Island and had an independent status, became a stepping stone for the Straw Hat Pirates to upgrade and fight monsters. A typical good hand of cards turned into a shitty game. But CP0 is different. CP0 is the branch with the highest status in the CP organization and is the upper level of CP1-9. Their members are very powerful. According to Sister Carmelo, among them there are world-class strongmen who are as powerful as the admirals of the Navy and are known as the strongest shield of the celestial dragons. At the same time, although this organization is under the banner of the world government, it is directly under the celestial dragons. Although CP1 to CP9 are all loyal dogs, CP0 is the most trusted loyal dog of the celestial dragons, and its status is far from comparable to that of CP1-9. And because they are directly under the celestial dragons, what they do not only represents the attitude of the 5 elders, but also the attitude of the celestial dragons, the world's nobility. Even if the 5 elders knew about CP0's crackdown on the Navy afterwards, they would turn a deaf ear to it due to their identity as celestial dragons. So the Navy is going to take advantage of this frustration. Ron blinked when he noticed the unusual smell in the air, and suddenly realized a problem. Wait a minute. Even if the CP organization wants to crack down on the Navy and invites the legendary CP0, but what does it have to do with me? Moreover, I now have 3 merits: carrying a lightning stimulation device, eliminating senior officials of Baroque works, and killing Hell Island crabs. Do you think CP0 dares to convict me? The subordinates' tricks also have to follow the rules. They are in the same camp and are fooling around like this. Do they really think the 5 elders dare not kill anyone? And so, I was pushed out by the warring states to attract fire. Ron discovered the truth instantly. After figuring this out, Ron suddenly walked up with a warm smile on his face, saluted, took the other person's hand, and said, "So you are the sir sent by the world government. Thank you for your hard work. You have come here by boat and travel, and I am sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. How about this, sir, you go back to your room to rest, have some wine and eat some food, and we will clean the core and then send it to you. It's none of my business, so I'll just stay out of it. Not only will there be no benefit in forcing my way in, but it will also help attract firepower for the warring states. I'm not stupid." Ron said this. Warring states. Garb. Zifa. Crane. The naval generals watching. CP0 people. Shame, shame. I have seen people who flatter their superiors, but I have never seen anyone who dares to flatter like this in front of so many senior officials. It is a real shame for the Navy. All of a sudden, everyone's eyes changed. Even Akainu, the loyal admiral who was trusted by the 5 elders in the original work, looked at Ron with contempt. This kid is so shameless. Seeing Zifa's face getting darker, Garp was shocked and said heartlessly, "I swear on my donuts. This brat will definitely be a high-ranking official in the future." Such shamelessness completely refreshed Garp's cognition. Ron sneered in his heart, "Sorry, our styles are different. You are a native who dreams of making a living, and I am a cunning and treacherous earthling. If you want me to help Zhangguo share the firepower, fill my pocket first." "Shut up, Garp." Zifa turned his head away, his lips trembling, and then he looked at his nose and his heart, not wanting to see Ron. Ron's interruption wiped out the tense atmosphere that had been brewing. CP0 had never received such naked and passionate compliments in such a serious occasion, and for a moment he was a little overwhelmed. This is unprecedented in the history of the CP organization. There is no other way. Excluding those tough guys in this world who are more bad-tempered than the other, which navy would dare to be so warm and friendly to the malicious people from the CP organization in front of their own marshal? Aren't you afraid of being stabbed? Don't you want face? In response, Ron said that he was a reliable adult and that face didn't matter at all. Only the benefits he got were real. After a long time, CP0 finally came back to his senses. He looked at Ron's smiling face, pulled his hand back, and there was an inexplicable emotion in his tone. Are you Ron? I've heard of you. You're really, unique. In response, Kizaru muttered quietly, see, I told you. There is a reason why CP0 is being gentle at this time. They are targeting the Navy, or rather, the Sengoku who commanded the Navy and did so many things. Ron is just an opportunity, an insignificant soldier caught between the two sides. Since ancient times, people with great achievements but low status either had a bad ending or soared to the sky. Although he came to criticize the Navy, it was just the lower-level CP branch that came back to call the parents after being beaten. Ron was the most favored rookie in the Navy by the five elders in recent years. He had made great achievements, so unless it was necessary, he didn't want to offend Ron. Besides, it's a good idea to not hit someone who smiles at you. Ron is so shameless. If he still makes a sarcastic face, then Zhangguo is not a pushover either. No one will be able to save face then. Thank you for your compliment, sir. I wonder what you think of my proposal. Ron continued to smile, and his expression did not seem fake. CP0 guessed that the expression under the mask must be very distorted at this moment. He hesitated for a moment and shook his head, no need. The authenticity of the core is of great importance and cannot be delayed. After that, he said to Zhangguo, the inspection was carried out by Caesar Kulang and Vegapunk at the same time. If there is no problem with the data, it is true. Then, CP0 used his palms as a knife and lightly cut across the walnut. Creak. A slight breeze blew and a small piece of the core was cut off. Ron's pupils shrank as he watched. Although the walnut was not a keratinous substance, it was much harder than steel and thunder. Moreover, the deeper it got, the harder it became. When he climbed out of the pit, he was afraid that he would bite it too hard and break it. Later, he found that no matter how hard he tried, the walnut remained motionless, with only a row of tooth marks on the surface. But now, even such a hard walnut was easily cut into a piece more than 20 centimeters thick. The other party didn't even make any preparations, he just raised his hand and accomplished this feat. The guy from CP0 is really not simple. Gently showing his attitude, the CP0 man raised the remaining walnuts with one hand and said, I'll take the main part away. You guys should hurry up. In response, Zhangguo said righteously, it's my duty. Wow! The warship flying the flag of the world government sailed away from the port, leaving a group of people standing there in salute. Go slowly, sir. Have a safe journey, sir. Ron waved his arms like a lackey, and when the warship turned into a small black dot, the charming smile on his face disappeared in an instant. The speed at which his expression changed was so fast that Zhangguo was stunned. Then he turned around, folded his arms across his chest, slightly raised his head, and looked at the group of naval generals in front of him who had not yet come to their senses with a look full of contempt. With a task sound, everything was said without words. Sorry, I'm not targeting anyone, I just want to say that everyone here is garbage. Warring states. Is it my imagination that I suddenly want to kick Ron out of the Navy? Chapter 84 Interest Negotiation. A serious beating storm was resolved by Ron with a grin. Although the generals always felt that something was not right, after all, they had survived a storm and avoided trouble, so they shook their heads and left the port without saying anything. But before leaving, everyone looked at Ron with strange eyes for a while. After what happened today, many generals who previously only labeled Ron as a genius and hardworking now secretly wrote a slogan, "This guy is very scheming and must not be provoked." As for shamelessness, smart people won't take it seriously. Everyone can see that CP0 wants to save face, and so does the warring states. If two people who want to save face collide, it will be like Mars hitting the Earth. But with Ron, a new recruit who doesn't want to save face, mediating, the two guys who want to save face naturally couldn't bring themselves to continue to fight head-on, so this effect was achieved. And Ron was able to understand this in an instant, and understood his advantage of being wrapped up in a shocking achievement, and took the initiative to be shameless, so scheming. Can't afford to offend. With the same advantage of the amazing achievements, if Ron and CP0 had come hard and shared the pressure for Zhang Guo, they would have only thought that Ron was hot-blooded and brave. But Ron chose to be shameless, which was scheming. Not only did he not share the pressure and bring trouble to himself, but he also despised all of them. In the end, I had to swallow this loss. But it's not from CP0, but from their own rookie. Caesar directed the researchers to carry the cut core fragments back, glanced at Ron standing between the big guys like Sengoku, opened his mouth and was about to say something, but was taken away by Kizaru by the collar. "You don't know until you try." When Caesar started to think about improving the design of the lightning stimulation instrument again, he found that the difficulty was quite amazing, and one move would affect the whole body. Now he can only maintain a safety threshold of 5,000 Dao force at most. If it is higher, the same situation as last time will occur again. So his house arrest time was long and endless. Anyway, the lieutenant generals of the headquarters who had no missions would go to the scientific corps for a stroll when they had nothing to do. Caesar was so scared that he was like a quail and hadn't slept well for several days. On the other side, Ron ignored Zhang Guo's gaze, which was mixed with scrutiny, surprise, anger, and depression, and came to Zifa and saluted. "Teacher Zifa, I'm back." Zifa looked at Ron in front of him, paused for a moment at the familiar face that had darkened a lot, tears welling up in his eyes. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Zifa wiped away his tears secretly, and said in a choked voice, "You know, Ron, when I heard that the beast tide caused heavy casualties among you, I felt." Zifa is not good at expressing his emotions. He always teaches his disciples by beating them, so that they will remember the lesson and never show a good face. But this does not mean that the old man in front of him has no emotions. On the contrary, Zifa can be said to be the one with the richest emotions in their generation. Making a living in this dangerous sea, fighting against powerful enemies, every patrol could be the last time they see each other, forever separated. If it weren't for the delicate feelings in my heart, I wouldn't dare to dream of having a home. Including the later Z, the source of Zephyr's plan to destroy the entire New World is also his hatred for pirates. From the admiral who doesn't kill to Z who wants to destroy the New World, only a person with rich emotions can breed such a huge hatred. Let me ask you, since both of their relatives were killed, in the Battle of Marineford, was Garp's hatred for Akainu less than Zephyr's hatred for the pirates? Of course not. But Garp held back because he was more rational than emotional. On the other hand, Zephyr was more emotional than rational. So this time the beast tide on Hell Island made Zifa very uncomfortable. He wanted to fly over immediately to rescue his disciples. If Zhang Guo hadn't stopped him for various reasons, Ron and others might have met them on the way back. "My condolences, teacher." Ron sighed. After the death of his wife and children, he resigned from his position as general, and the new recruits' camp can be said to be Zifa's only spiritual sustenance. He cannot understand Zifa's feelings for his disciples because he does not have such rich experience. But the fact that he can be so devoted to outsiders who have no blood relationship with him does not prevent him from admiring Zifa. The flying squirrel grinned and decided to keep the fact that Ron was the one who caused the beast tide a secret for the rest of his life and not tell anyone. Moreover, Ron's act was unintentional, and the victim was a disciple whom his teacher treated as his own son. Once the truth is revealed, how should these two masters and apprentices get along? This is fate. The flying squirrel is now becoming more and more indifferent to life. Zhang Guo stood silently by the side, and after Zifa calmed down, he patted him on the shoulder and said to Ron. Ron, you brought back the core of the Hell Island crab this time, which is a great achievement. I will count it towards your military merit. But you haven't been officially awarded a military rank yet, so you can't enjoy the reward directly. So do you have any requests? As long as I can do it, I will definitely help you accomplish it. This was the conclusion that Zhang Guo and Flying Squirrel came to after careful discussion. After all, the complete solution to the Hell Island crab issue was a huge achievement. More than 10 years ago, when the Hell Island crabs were wreaking havoc everywhere, the 5 elders said that whoever could solve this problem would be given a high position and generous salary. How tall is it? As long as the Hell Island crab is completely killed and the strength is sufficient, the 4th position will be a foregone conclusion. The 5 elders were also forced into a corner at that time. There was no way. When the Hell Island crab was rioting, all the areas it passed through were member states of the world government, just like they had a grudge against them. At that time, the world government took advantage of the chaos caused by the Great Pirate Era, and a total of more than 200 countries joined them to seek asylum. As a result, after being messed up by the Hell Island crab, only more than 170 countries were left, and a vacuum zone was directly created. Later, it was the Navy that made great sacrifices to suppress the Hell Island crabs in the sparsely populated doldrums, temporarily ending the disaster. Just this plot alone can fill up 1 or 2 episodes of a theatrical version. Now that Ron has completely wiped out the Hell Island crabs as a new recruit, if he is really rewarded according to his merits, he will definitely be promoted to the rank of Lieutenant General, if not General. But doing so will do more harm than good to Ron, as he still lacks a foundation and is easily targeted by others, whether overtly or covertly. The people in the One Piece world also know that the tree that stands out in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. After all, the pirates who die the fastest among the new pirates that appear every year are the ones who make the most noise. So Zhang Guo simply used a promise to appease Ron. He believed that with Ron's cunningness, he would definitely understand why he did this. Sure enough, Ron turned around and his face became serious. If you don't have a military rank, you can't directly receive rewards. This is just for those who don't know much. If the Admiral of the Navy can't reward people according to their merits, this world would have been overturned by pirates long ago. So Ron knew that Sengoku would not be so stupid as to erase his merits, but had other purposes. Sure enough, not enough foundation. Ron thought for a moment, then glanced at Zifa and made a judgment in his heart. Then I'll just say it straight. Go ahead. But you know what's going on, so don't tell me any more. It's great to chat with smart people. Zhang Guo's mood finally improved a little, and he could ignore the things that Ron despised just now. Although he was a little bolder, had a bad temper, and was a little more capable of causing trouble, he had both strength and brains. Where can you find such a rookie? But in the end, he still said that it was impossible to do anything too extreme. Everyone was working under the rules, and breaking the rules would not be good for anyone. Don't worry, my request is easy for the Marshal. Ron grinned. He didn't care about military rank or anything like that. Only strength was the hard currency. Zhang Guo didn't want to be too prominent and unable to improve his military rank, so he offered compensation, which was exactly what Ron wanted. You tell me first. Zhang Guo felt his back tighten for some reason when he saw the gleam in Ron's eyes, and for a moment he wanted to break his promise. It's actually very simple. From now on, no matter what Mr. Zephyr teaches me, the Navy cannot interfere with it for any reason, such as not enough military merit, not enough military merit, not enough military merit, etc. Say important things 3 times. Ron finished his request in one breath and raised an eyebrow at Zephyr. The latter was stunned for a second, and suddenly took a breath of cold air. Zifa thought that Ron would ask to learn all the 6 styles of the Navy, Haki, and so on. After all, in the development of the Thunder Fruit, the scientific forces were more useful than him, Zifa. But he didn't expect to get such an answer. As long as Zifa doesn't interfere with Ron's teaching on the grounds of insufficient military merit, he can teach Ron the above content at any time. It seems that Ron has made a fortune, but you have to know that once this requirement is met, the initiative is in Zifa's hands. Ron was able to give up the clearly priced benefits to make this choice. What a trust this shows! For a moment, Zifa burst into tears again. Ron! So you still want to become stronger? Zhang Guo frowned slightly. He was also shocked by Ron's idea. However, this request did not exceed his expectations. On the contrary, it was above the upper limit he had prepared. Zhang Guo thought for a moment and nodded, "Okay, I agree to this request." Then he looked at Ron and said, "But even so, Ron, you can't be too ambitious. If you want to learn the 6 styles of the Navy, practicing Haki at the same time will only distract you and do more harm than good. Do you understand?" In response, Ron smiled and said, "I understand. Many book lovers don't know the meaning of recommendation. Well, let's put it this way. Search Kidian Data, open Kidian Data Network, then select PC Kidian Main Station, and select Second Dimension. They are both listed on the category homepage, and the difference is obvious at a glance. Then click on the book titles one by one, scroll to the bottom of the recommendation record, and compare a few books, and you will know why. They are both small-scale recommendations, with similar word counts, but the top 3 have additional app recommendations from the same period, so the gap with the last 2 is doubled. This is the purpose of the recommendation column, to let more people see your book and then click to collect it. What recommendations are made in a book is determined not only by the editor's judgment but also by the comparison of various data. Among them, recommendation votes, rewards, and click-to-collect ratio are very important. This is also the reason why Dashu asks for collection and recommendation, to compete for resources. Therefore, I hope that all book lovers will cast more recommendation votes after reading the book. Whether you have money or not, you can support me. I would like to thank you very much. End of this chapter. Chapter 85 Sets Sail. Major General Ron. Chapter 85 Sets Sail. Major General Ron. It is a hot summer day, the scorching sun hangs in the sky, scorching the earth. Under the scorching sun, the Navy headquarters was as lively as ever. But today was different from the past. There was no noise of drills, only shock and reverence. In the square, soldiers stood in neat rows, casting admiring and envious eyes at the tall figure on the platform who was receiving the medal ceremony. The results of the survival training have come out, and today is the ceremony for Ron and others to officially become naval officers. After the same period of colleagues excitedly stepped down with their own righteous cloaks, the finale came. Ron walked in front of Zhang Guo. "That's Mr. Ron, right? Tisk tisk, comparison is the root of death. Why are you jealous? Ron is a real monster." "What? Ron? Is he Senior Ron?" In the ranks of the recruit camp, several recruits' eyes lit up when they heard this, and they curiously asked the veterans standing next to them for advice. The headquarters recruit camp is not a military school. There is no rule that you must be 15 years old to graduate. As long as you have the ability, the strong ones like Ron can participate in survival training and prepare to leave the camp in more than half a year. Therefore, the headquarters recruit camp recruits new members very quickly. When Ron was about to come to this world for a year without knowing it, another batch of recruits was selected to join the headquarters recruit camp. "Yes, he is Ron. No, from now on you should call him Major General Ron." The veterans said this with great emotion. A monster who set the fastest qualification record in the recruit camp. A genius who has achieved remarkable feats time and again while still a new recruit. He may not be the strongest, but he is definitely the most special. Since these new recruits joined the headquarters recruit camp, the legend they heard the most was about Ron. A powerful thunderbolt fruit user, the last disciple of former Navy Admiral Blackarm Zephyr, and a super rookie who continued the legend of the three admirals. It took only 2 months from almost failing when he first joined to bursting out with amazing power in the year-end evaluation. Now, a little over half a year later, he has successfully walked out of the recruit camp with the rank of Major General. It can be said that in the next decade or so, every batch of recruits in the boot camp will sweat profusely while listening to Ron's legend, looking forward to having such a day. And what made them most excited was that Ron saved the world. The crisis of the Hell Island crabs has been completely resolved, and even the 5 elders have sent people over to express their appreciation. If Ron had not joined halfway but had been trained since childhood, they would have even thought of pulling Ron into the CP organization. As long as he stayed in the CP organization for a period of time to accumulate qualifications and connections, Ron would definitely be a member of the high-ranking official seat of the world government. The real highest official in the country. Strength, power, wealth, fame, Ron now has everything except wealth, and is the well-deserved idol of the recruits. Sure enough, it's very unique. The user of the thunder fruit is so scary, so scary. Kizaru sat in his seat, looking at the calm figure standing behind Sengoku who was giving a speech and spoke slowly. He still spoke in his usual nonchalant tone, but Akainu and Aokiji could tell that Kizaru didn't have any teasing in his tone at this time. Ron is a real monster. Even the 3 of them could not deny this. After all, think about it, what did they do in the boot camp for a year and a half? The only achievement that can be shown off is the annihilation of several arrogant pirate groups during the actual combat training that started in May and June. However, if Ron had not chosen to leave the camp and continued to study in the recruit camp, wouldn't he have been able to do it? Of course not. It's not that he can't do it, he just doesn't have the time to do it. Ron's growth rate is so fast that Zifa is helpless and unable to teach him. He can only let him leave the camp early to accumulate military merits before he can continue teaching him. With this terrifying growth rate, no one knows where Ron's limit is. If he can reach this point in half a year, what about a year? 2 years? 10 years? At this moment, even though they are the world's top powerhouses, they can't help but feel a sense of urgency. They have been called the strongest force in the Navy for too long, so long that the whole sea is in a state of panic, and naturally they have developed a sense of arrogance. But Ron's appearance today made them realize that there was someone who could shake them. He was more talented and more determined than them. If they stood still, it would only be a matter of time before they were surpassed. If you are not being chased, you don't feel the urgency. Unconsciously, the mentality of the 3 generals has changed a little. Maybe, in another 7 or 8 years, one of us will have to give way to him. Kizaru pouted and returned to his usual vulgar self. Is that right, Admiral Akainu? Humph. If he can beat me, what if I give him this position of general? Akainu snorted coldly and continued the conversation. The hawkish Akainu wanted to build the navy into a complete punishment machine, sweeping across the new world with an iron-blooded wind. His goal has always been to become the Navy Admiral, and the prerequisite for becoming an admiral must be an admiral, without exception. The fact that he could say this showed that Ron had left a very deep impression on him. After all, Ron was brought into the Navy by Garp, and his thoughts are more in line with the carefree style of the Garp faction, which is definitely not compatible with his iron-blooded military attitude. Akainu sees it very clearly. If Ron really goes to that step and becomes an admiral, even if he becomes a marshal, with Aokiji who has always been at odds with him, Kizaru who doesn't care about the neutral party, and Ron who is a Garp faction who doesn't care about anything, it will still be difficult for the Navy to change its current weak atmosphere. At that time, it would be better for me to abdicate voluntarily. But he will not give up, because the difficulties he may face after becoming the marshal are the same as those faced by Aokiji, and the two are in the same situation. Thinking of this, Akainu sneered and said, "But if I become the admiral before that, everything will be easy." Aokiji glanced at him with a meaningful look and said calmly, "Don't be so excited, Admiral Akainu. The marshal is not old enough to abdicate." All of a sudden, the three of them felt a murderous intent at the same time. Akainu's mouth twitched twice and he shut up. Kizaru began to trim his nails carelessly, while Aokiji took off his eye mask and began to close his eyes to rest. These three bastards! Sengoku, who possessed the observation haki, had murderous intent in his eyes. "I have been working hard to train new people, but you guys are discussing the next marshal behind my back? Are you guys too proud or am I too weak to lift the knife? But now is not the time to worry about these things." Zhangguo withdrew his gaze and coughed twice. "Ahem. Congratulations, Ron." Now it was Ron's awarding ceremony. After listing Ron's achievements, he took out a folded cloak of justice and held it in front of Ron. Zhangguo was a little emotional. Compared with those three bastards, Ron was still better. At least it looks pleasing to the eye. It's all thanks to the Admiral's teaching. Without the Navy, I wouldn't be where I am today. I will always remember this kindness. From today on, I will sacrifice my life for justice. Ron had a confident smile on his face and reached out to take the cape. Today he would officially leave his status as a recruit and become a naval officer. He had already left the recruit's short-sleeved shirt in the room and changed into the black suit Zifa gave him. Why is it a gift? No way, poor. Where can a new recruit with no background get money? Fortunately, the Navy provided food and accommodation even after leaving the camp, otherwise Ron's first move as a new officer would be to imitate the scum of the Navy and find ways to make some money. He has a dragon sword, Leon, hanging on his waist, short hair and a tough face. His facial features, which are not pretty, have unique confidence and determination, which adds a lot of points to him. His bright eyes are always as calm as water, and he is not startled even if the sky falls. His unremitting exercise makes his muscles well proportioned, and his body is lifted but not bloated. After putting on a suit, Ron can also be called a handsome man. Zhangguo was mentally prepared for Ron's nonsense, and such shameless compliments did not change his expression. What else could he do? The Navy has produced such a shameless person, I am also desperate. Coupled with the three generals who are thinking of seeking power and usurping the throne, Zhangguo felt a pain in his liver. Stop talking nonsense. You have 3 minutes to speak. Get out of here after you finish speaking. Zhangguo's mood suddenly turned bad, and he put on a smile, then glanced at Ron with a cold gaze. The latter was suddenly startled and stood at attention and saluted. Swish! The cloak of justice fluttered in the wind as Ron put it on his shoulders. The bright gold star on the epaulets told everyone that from today on, the Navy headquarters had one more rear admiral. Not everyone is qualified to attend the awarding ceremony. Generally speaking, even for officers at the colonel level, only a brief awarding speech will be arranged, and no large-scale gathering of all personnel will be held for an awarding ceremony. Only when the rank of general is officially conferred will the awarding ceremony be held. The exaggerated and grand layout, coupled with the arrangement of newspaper reporters to interview and report on the promotion of the sea, is the only way for the headquarters to encourage soldiers. Ron's contribution is too great. Although he cannot be directly listed as a lieutenant general of the headquarters due to various reasons, he is fully qualified to be a major general. That night, many people came to Ron's independent courtyard. Almost all the vice-admirals of the headquarters were present. Garp's face recognition was very effective. The appearance of the lightning stimulation device gave the vice-admirals no reason not to give Ron face, and they all came to congratulate him. At the same time, because Ron had a good relationship with Garp, the latter was the guide of the former. Whether it was the Doves or the Hawks in the Navy, they had no opinion on him. The Cap faction is not a formal faction name, it just refers to a group of people who gather around Cap's personal charm. For example, the troublemaker Smoker a few years ago, this group of people has the same attitude towards everyone, and both the Doves and Hawks are used to it. A group of lieutenant generals came in and toasted Zifa first. After all, most of them were Zifa's disciples and were Ron's senior brothers. Soon, Zifa, who was in a good mood, drank too much and started to act crazy. 3 or 5 people couldn't hold him. Garp, the only one who had the strength and dared to attack Zifa, ate donuts heartlessly beside him, adding fuel to the fire from time to time, teasing Zifa, making the scene even more chaotic. Looking at his big bed that had been trampled on by a large group of people and turned into a doghouse after not getting any sleep, Ron had a smile on his face but thought to himself, MMP. If today wasn't a suitable day to get angry, Ron would have taught them a lesson with his Hell Ape move without hesitation. Of course, if he really did it, the consequence would most likely be that he, the new Major General, would be beaten up by a group of senior officers, and then hung on the mast to blow the sea breeze all night. Not only would it be embarrassing, but the next day he would be criticized by Jean Guo for destroying public property and would have to write a self-criticism. Don't be surprised, what can't that old bastard Carp do? Long time no see, my Captain Ron. Just as Ron was gritting his teeth, a familiar voice drew his attention back. Ron turned his head and looked, his eyes sparkling, Your Majesty Rosa. The person who came was the former king of Flower City, Rosa. Alongside him were the fishman General Jade, who had not been seen for a long time, and the king of Flower City, Fred, who was beaten up by Jade. I am not a king now. I am just an old man enjoying his retirement. After not seeing each other for many days, Rosa became more kind. It seemed that Rosa was in a much better mood since Fred succeeded to the throne. Come to think of it, Fred proved his means and ambition in a rebellion. Now everything is left to his nephew to do. He no longer has to worry about Hwachu. It is normal for Rosa to be in a better mood. I heard you were awarded an honor today just after landing. I came in a hurry and didn't bring any gifts. This gem is for you. As she spoke, Rosa took out a crystal-clear emerald from her arms and handed it to Ron. Just come here, why are you being so polite? Ron spoke modestly, but he took the gem in a flash and put it in his arms. There's no way, he is really poor now. The drinks and food for tonight's party were paid for by our senior brother Xiuzhou. None of the lieutenant generals who came to congratulate him had the nerve to give Bailey the gifts directly, but instead gave him a bunch of strange treasures, which were difficult to sell here and would easily offend people. But no matter how precious the treasure is, you can't bring food with you. Queen Rosa is really honest. A gem, whether it is sold at the town's exchange or exchanged for Bailey's with the female sailors, is a huge profit. Ron smiled even happier after receiving the gift, but his eyes rolled and he thought of Rosa's other purpose. So he leaned over and asked in a low voice, since King Rosa is here, is it? Naturally. Rosa looked at Ron, who was like a little fox in front of her, and couldn't help but chuckle with her hands covering her mouth. For a moment, it was like 1,000 flowers blooming, making people intoxicated. Even though time is unforgiving, the Queen's charm remains unchanged. Didn't you see that old bastard Carp's eyes were bulging out? Rosa called out to Jed, who took out a box from his arms and handed it to Ron. The tall fishman Jade stood over and even blocked out the lights. He smacked his lips and said, I can understand your experience in training armament haki. After all, you are a navy, and everything is based on military merit. But is my fishman karate useful to you? That's right, this was the content of the deal between Ron and Rosa. He helped Rosa solve the internal and external troubles in Flower City, and Rosa helped him find the experience of practicing armament haki, so that he could bypass the restrictions on Navy military merits and practice self-cultivation. But fishman karate, a fruit power user? Are you still planning to go to the sea? Are you kidding me? General Jade is a natural talent. Having spent decades on land, he has evolved the fishman karate that requires liquid as the element of performance into a unique wind-stepping technique. This ability is not limited to naval battles. Ron smiled mysteriously without further explanation. Jed's face turned red at this answer, and he remained silent. Why did the fishman karate, which requires liquid as the element of performance, evolve into a wind-stepping technique that can be released on land, and its power increased instead of decreased? Ron looked at Cap, who was pretending to be calm, with sympathy. Even without the handsome Uncle Fred, Cap's love rival was still quite strong. The first volume ends here, and a new chapter is about to begin. By the way, last night Dasher revised the content written in the previous article based on the setting that the thunder fruit cannot fly but can only float, and changed it to the thunder fruit can fly as the keynote. If you want to see the revised content, just add this book to the bookshelf again. If there is anything that has not been revised, please leave a comment in this chapter or in the book review area so that Dasha can sort it out. Let me tell you one more thing. You may not believe it, but I actually missed 2 chapters after chapter 53. After I found this when I checked, I put those 2 chapters after chapter 53. I wonder how many book friends still remember that Dasher wrote 10,000 or 20,000 words at that time, and then republished it in chapters. It was during that process that I missed a full 6,000 words. Because I wrote it myself, I was not surprised at all. If I hadn't checked it last night, I would have felt that something was missing after reading it over and over again. I really don't know what happened. Finally, please recommend and collect. I don't have high requirements, I just hope that you can get it on the shelves with 10,000 collections. 10 guaranteed chapters after the release. Even though it was a failure, I can shamelessly say that Dash's writing is very honest and never drags his feet. Here, I'm counting on you all. Chapter 86 Mission arrives. A few days later, in the courtyard where Ron was, Zifa held the Armament Haki Training Experience book and read it carefully. After a long time, he closed the book and nodded. As expected of a strong man who has traveled through the New World, this training experience can be used as a direct reference for practice. As long as the physical strength keeps up, awakening the Armament Haki will be a natural result. Although no one in Hwaju possesses Haki, with Hwaju's national strength, there is naturally no problem in collecting a book on the practice of Armament Haki left by a strong man. After all, this thing is everywhere in the New World, and it is not a secret treasure. Moreover, Armament Haki cannot be awakened whenever you want. What is precious is not the method, but the difficulty of practice. Take Jade as an example. His physique is completely enough to learn Haki, but his talent seems to be all in the wind-stepping style, and he knows nothing about Haki. After that, Zifa looked at Ron with a smile on his face. You made a big move to circumvent the military merit restriction. The Navy's military merit only restricts Zephyr from teaching Ron Haki privately, but if Ron finds a way to practice Haki himself, the Navy cannot stop him from learning. I thought Ron had done enough in the Flower City incident, teaming up with the Queen to fool Fred and Garp and wipe out the Baroque works, but I didn't expect the real focus to be here. Ron sat in a rocking chair and sipped his tea leisurely. This was a pound of good tea that Kizaru gave him. The generals could not come that night due to their status, but they all sent gifts. Even Akainu, who had the most complaints about Roan, sent a painting. Roan's future was clear. He wanted to be a marshal, so it was inevitable to win over Roan. In Kizaru's character, drinking tea, reading newspapers, and trimming manicures are 3 indispensable things. It is worth mentioning that Caesar also wanted to come over and get close to him, but Kizaru said he would not go and spent the whole night supervising Caesar's experimental equipment. Hearing Zifa's comments, Ron smiled. This way, even if I go out in the future, I can practice Armament Haki on my own. When you sort out the experience of practicing observation Haki, I won't have to worry about food and drink. Because of the death of the nobles of the allied countries, the Flower City fought for several months, and the reward promised to Roan was delayed again and again, until now. But it can't be said to be useless. After all, Jed was able to change the Fishman Karate to version 2.0 for Rosa. He naturally did his best to collect the experience, and it is said that he even went back to Fishman Island for this. The arrival of this experience can save Zifa a lot of time, and he can also start practicing faster. Just as he was thinking happily, he heard the sound of wind in his ears. Ron closed his eyes and grabbed the experience of cultivation with his backhand. Don't be too ambitious, kid. Whether it's armament haki or observation haki, it's not that easy to awaken. Zifa glared at Ron and said, during this month's free time, you should first memorize the remaining 3 moves and 6 styles of training methods. Learn as much as you can. Just try out the wind-stepping Fishman Karate and get familiar with the power of different systems. Once you can control the return of life, it will be easier to awaken the domineering aura. As the 1-year deadline approached, Zifa became more and more nervous. He didn't know if Ron would be able to maintain his current terrifying growth rate after the expiration. He could only use cramming teaching, cramming everything he could into his lessons, and then letting Ron slowly digest and absorb it. Among these, the return of life is the second path he prepared for Ron. The 6th style secret, life return, is a completely bug skill. It allows the controller to control every cell in the body, even the hair. However, those abilities to block blood flow and control wound contraction are inferior. The real point is that as long as you learn how to return life and see your true nature, you can learn anything quickly. It can be called the Yi Jinjing of the One Piece world. As long as he learns this magical skill, even if the effect of the drug expires, Ron will not instantly fall from a genius to a useless person. Of course I know this, but I have another purpose. I have to learn haki first. Even if I can't learn haki, I must learn the wind-stepping Fishman Karate. Ron didn't know his situation, so he explained and, under Zifa's puzzled gaze, he uttered a name, Baroque Works. Zifa was startled and frowned. A month later, in the basement training room of the recruit camp. The steel room was filled with seawater, reaching the knees. Ron felt uncomfortable standing in the seawater. The familiar feeling of powerlessness after falling into the sea on Sky Island made him irritable. The high-voltage current on his body was unconsciously released, pushing the water surface into layers of ripples. Taking a deep breath, Ron slowly moved his left foot forward and lunged back. Suddenly, swish! Ron's eyes fixed, he clasped his hands together and raised them upwards fiercely. Fishman Karate Wind Stepping Style Water Dragon Bullet, 10. Instantly, the seawater in the training room made a humming sound, and a huge whirlpool appeared out of thin air. With Ron as the center, it spread wildly in all directions, revealing the hard steel floor below. Then, the seawater that had spread to the extreme rushed up into the sky, forming a snake-like water whip in the air, and crashed into the opposite wall. Boom! The seawater with its tremendous force slammed into the wall crazily, causing cracks in the steel. But then, the seawater did not dissipate immediately, but bounced off the wall, bending and continuing to hit and bounce. After bouncing 5 or 6 times, the force was exhausted, and the water dragon finally dispersed with a loud bang. Hiss! Ron used the electromagnetic barrier to block the seawater, then looked at the room with 5 spider web-like cracks on the wall and smiled with satisfaction. It's really a magical wind-stepping style. It uses wind to control water, not focusing on the water flow. It penetrates the will of the wind, and its power increases instead of decreasing. It is a truth known to many people that ocean waves are driven not only by tides but also by strong winds. But looking at the sea, all the users of Fishman Karate are water-based, and their fighting power is doubled in the sea, but they forget the significance of wind. It's just like Jinbe's attack on Big Mom on Cake Island, crushing the teacup and using tea to perform. In the absence of water, Fishman karate is not as good as ordinary fighting skills. At least the Navy 6 styles can beat it. In order to allow Rosa to live on land for a long time, Jed developed the wind-stepping flow in the absence of sufficient water flow. He replaced the sea water with the equally plastic wind and integrated it into the Fishman karate, pushing it to a higher level. I have to say, based on this point alone, if he were a pirate, he would definitely be able to stir up trouble in the New World. Fred deserved to lose. Ron sighed again, raised his hand, put his fingers together, and waved it forward. Zzz. Fishman karate wind-stepping style mine arrow. Puff, hiss. An arrow of sea water shot out from the water, wrapped in the force of the strong wind, and flew towards the wall at high speed. The next second, a small hole suddenly appeared in the wall, and the sizzling electric current continued to spread on the wall, dyeing the water surface a clear blue. The sea water filled with surging electric currents has both the destructive power of lightning and the restraining effect on fruit ability users. This is a unique skill that Ron has mastered this month. Without attribute restraint and without armament haki, you can't kill the natural type? Joke. Ron will use this trick to tell Crocodile how powerful it is when the nature system plays with water. After the Flower City incident, Baroque Works had a very hard time. Mr. 1 was arrested, Mr. 3 was killed, and Miss Golden Week was adopted by Crane. This was a heavy blow to Baroque Works. All operations were turned into secrets, and even the Dark World could not detect any news. The loss of personnel is secondary. The important point is that the Navy told the world through this action that Baroque Works is nothing to worry about. If you dare to go against the Navy, no matter how evil you are, you will be defeated. Compared with the loss of high-end combat power, after being hit hard, others no longer have faith and trust in Baroque Works. With no business to do and no money to make, this indirectly affects the plan to steal the country. This is the real crisis of Baroque Works. It is conceivable that Crocodile hates himself very much. The calm of the past few months is just the calm before the storm. In the past, he had always stayed at the Navy headquarters, and had been escorted by the Vice Admiral of the headquarters on both trips, so the enemy had no chance to attack him. But now that he was a Major General, his reputation as a rookie in the Navy spread across the sea, and he was about to go out to sea for a mission. Ron didn't believe that Crocodile would hold back from attacking. That cruel and cold-blooded sand crocodile, if it doesn't attack, it's fine, but once it attacks, it will definitely be with murderous intent. Among all the participants in the Hwaju incident, I, who was independent, was the easiest target. Only by completely eradicating myself, the culprit, could I restore the reputation of the Baroque workshop. That's why Ron told Zifa that the 6 styles of the Navy and life return can be put aside, and armament haki and fishman karate are the real things. As an outsider, Zifa couldn't see the secret clearly, but he believed that Ron would not do it without a purpose. Ron had given him the initiative to teach, so Zifa had great trust in this disciple. Crunch! Speak of the devil appears. With an unpleasant sound of distortion, the damaged steel door was pushed open by brute force. Zifa looked at the sea water flowing down his ankles into the corridor, his face twitched, and he said to Ron, "The Marshal has a mission for you, follow me." The 1-month rest and adaptation period is over, and Ron must officially contribute his strength to the Navy. Ron wasn't surprised by this, he nodded and walked out the door. And many more. Suddenly, Zifa stopped him, and under the latter's confused gaze, he pointed at the chaotic sea water outside and said, "Use lightning to evaporate the sea water for me. Do not hurt anyone or damage public property. If you can't do it, then take it out bucket by bucket." Ron. Chapter 87 History Text. Headquarters Fortress, Marshal's Office. Boom boom boom. Come in. Wearing toed glasses, Jean Guo stared at the master and apprentice who walked into the office, with a look of dissatisfaction on his face. Why did it take so long? As a Marine, have you even forgotten the most basic concept of time? Ron. 2. You've just become a major general and you're already so tired, what do you want to do? Ron. Looking at Zifa beside him, Ron silently prayed that a friend would die rather than be killed, and replied after saluting, report to the marshal. Teacher Zifa asked me to clean up, so I am late. Shut up. Being late is being late, there is no excuse. Zhang Guo's face turned pale and he shouted, go back and give me a 3,000 word self-examination. This will not happen again. Do you understand? Ron, understood. Hey hey. Zifa sneered beside him, and shrugged his shoulders at Ron's look of surprise. Little boy, all is fair in war, you know. No, 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 you are a bunch of snakes and rats, working together for evil. To put it bluntly, you just want to teach me a lesson, right? Just like taking the driving test, no matter how good the students are, they will be caught and scolded first to make them more vigilant and prevent accidents before they happen. As expected, they have been friends for decades, and they can complete such a clever cooperation without even making eye contact. Seeing Ron acting like a grandson, Zhang Guo was in a good mood and sat back in his seat. Then he opened the drawer and fumbled around inside, saying, now you are a formal officer, and a major general serving in the headquarters. Your every move represents the face of the Navy, so cheer up. Yes. That's good. This is your task. Take it and have a look. As he spoke, Zhang Guo seemed to have touched something, and threw it onto the table and pushed it to Ron. Creak. But at this moment, there was a crisp sound, and something accidentally fell to the ground. The three people's eyes were fixed on the unknown object, and the air was quiet for a while. Ron blinked and smiled. Marshal, is there anything else we can discuss about writing the self-criticism? Warring states. Ahem, what kind of examination? How come I don't know? Ron nodded with a happy expression on his face. Indeed, I didn't see anything either. After Ron left with the mission information, Zifa glared at Zhang Guo with a look of disappointment and angrily yelled, Zhang Guo, you old thief! Can't you hide the senbei better? Is it my fault? The bastard Garp would have found me no matter how well I hid it. He just didn't dare to rummage through the place where the important documents were stored. Click! Zhang Guo tore open the plastic bag, took out a piece of senbei, and handed it to Zifa. Do you want to eat it? As a marshal, he cannot leave the office without permission for the sake of dignity and duty. But things always have to come to an end. After dealing with documents, Zhang Guo, who was bored, had the only pleasure to sneak in some snacks. Anyway, this is the marshal's office, who dares to come in without knocking? Later, he developed a habit of eating a little when he had a headache, when he was bored, and when he was in a good mood. Snacks were always available in the office. Zifa was so angry that smoke came out of his nose. He glared at Zhang Guo and turned away. Eat, eat, eat. Eat until you die, you old bastard. Be careful of diabetes from too much sugar. Then you might as well persuade Garp first. Donuts are the real high-calorie food. If anyone is going to die, he should die first. Zhang Guo shrugged and chewed the senbei with a crunching sound. The first mission that Sengoku gave Ron was not a big event. It was just an invasion of pirates from a member state, and the kingdom army was no match for them, so Sengoku sent Ron to wipe out the pirates. It's pure fighting and killing, without any intrigue. For a newcomer, this kind of mission is very good. Half a day later, Ron arrived at the port and prepared to set off. Adjutant Dante, who had received orders long ago, had already gathered the personnel and lined up at the port waiting for their superiors. It is worth mentioning that it took Quindante's father more than 10 years to become a colonel from a branch sergeant, and his son became a major in the headquarters directly after graduation. Dante showed his extraordinary command ability during the trip to Hell Island, and was highly regarded by Zhang Guo. The soldiers were also quite convinced and praised him. After all, not every generation can lead a team to make a living on Hell Island. In view of Dongt's potential and his father's face, Zhang Guo did not let Dongt go to Sihai for training, but sent him to the G6 branch. Anyway, the mature Dongt now only lacks strength, so there is no need for him to go to Sihai for training. However, this transfer was rejected by Danti. He took the initiative to ask to become Ron's adjutant, believing that he could become stronger faster by being with Ron. As a major general, it would not be excessive for him to have a major as his adjutant. After thinking about it, Zhang Guo agreed to Dongti's request. Danti and Ron were from the same generation, so they had a common language and would not take advantage of their seniority. If someone else was assigned, he might not be as good as Danti. With Ron's bad temper, if he was disobedient as his adjutant, his fate would be worse than being Smoker's superior. Major General Ron. Danti, who was wearing a brown suit and also a cloak of justice, saw Ron and began to salute from a distance. Ron saluted in return, glanced at the Navy soldiers on the deck of the warship who were ready to go, and asked, "Thank you for your hard work. How are your preparations? This is the war beast that I asked the Marshal to assign to me with the help of Mr. Zifa. Don't let anything go wrong." In theory, the main admiral is qualified to be equipped with a war beast, but after all, it is expensive, and only a few powerful elites can use the war beast as the main ship. Ron has no ability, but he has a teacher of high status. He shamelessly talked to Zhang Guo for a long time. Zhang Guo, seeing Zifa's words, allocated a spare old warship to him. "Everything is ready, we can go at any time." Although he was serving as Ron's adjutant for the purpose of becoming stronger, there was a huge difference between an ordinary warship and a war beast. The firepower alone was nearly 5 times different. Dong was also very excited to be the second in command on the war beast. "That's great, let's get on board." "Yes." Looking at the war beast slowly raising its sails in front of him, Ron had to say that he was a little excited. Punching flesh to flesh is a man's romance, and bigger, thicker, harder and stronger is also a man's romance. The steel monster with gun barrels standing in front of him and exuding a murderous aura completely meets Ron's aesthetic taste. This romantic taste is incomprehensible to ordinary people. A dog-headed warship. Looking up at his own warship, Ron suddenly discovered a dog-head warship also docked at the port in the distance. Since the banquet that night, Garp, Rosa, and others have disappeared, and Ron has been concentrating on training and doesn't know the reason. But now looking at the square object covered with canvas and tied tightly that is being slowly hoisted down from the dog-head warship, Ron knows that his guess has come true. On the deck, Cap's eyes were dignified and serious, with a tiger-like ferocity that was not concealed at all, staring closely at every soldier in charge of carrying the cargo. When he saw Ron, he simply nodded lightly, and then continued to observe the lifting process. "I see." Rosa and the others finally dug out the historical text. "Is Garp in charge of transporting it?" Ron couldn't think of anything other than the historical text that Crocodile was willing to give up and was sure it wasn't treasure. Now it turned out that he was right. When the anti-invasion war with other countries ended, Fred was also curious about what the Baroque works was digging. He continued digging along the big pit they dug, and finally he dug up the historical text buried underground. So they immediately rushed to the Navy headquarters, even landing on the island in the middle of the night, and handed it over to the world government through the Navy. Regardless of whether it is the fourth signpost historical text that did not appear in the original book or the historical text that records the intelligence of ancient weapons, it is a hot potato for Hwaju. Private research will be destroyed by the Demon Slayer order, and leaks of the news will attract ambitious pirates. The safest way is to hand it over to the world government. If Rosa can't even understand this, she doesn't deserve to be called the Queen of 1,000 Faces. Upon receiving such important news, Zhang Guo immediately arranged for Garp to go to Hwaju to escort the historical text without saying a word. Moving at full speed, the round-trip time that originally took 2 months was compressed into 1 month. If Ron guessed correctly, soon a big shot from the CP organization would come out of Mary Gosa with the orders of the 5 elders to receive the historical text. As expected, before they were completely away from the headquarters, a warship flying the flag of the world government crossed their way. The other side was higher in rank, and Ron lined up on the side of the deck to salute, and suddenly found that the visitor was an acquaintance, the CP0 who was commissioned to knock the Navy. "Hello, sir." "Goodbye, sir." Looking at that familiar shameless smile, CP0 remained silent. Then he turned his head and whispered to himself, "Just a major general? Pretty smart, Jean Guo." Chapter 88, Repairing the Ship in the Seven Waters City. Grand Route, City of Seven Waters. This is a water city that looks like a fountain. Buildings are stacked radially from top to bottom, with clean and clear water flowing in between. When the sun shines, the whole city is shrouded in a hazy mist, like a dream, not like the human world. As a water city, the roads here are very special. Except for the narrow bluestone ground in front of the shops on both sides, there are only waterways in the center of the road. Local residents raise a magical creature called Blue as a means of water transportation. Blue has a strong carrying capacity and can be used to carry goods. Blue is gentle and pleasant in character. The small Blue with a double seat is a popular recreational item. Starting from the Navy headquarters, Ron and his team's first stop was the Seven Water City. Of course, Ron was not here for fun, nor for the Pluto design drawings. Their mission location this time was Puke, the food capital, and the sea train of the Seven Waters capital could go directly there. As an Earthling, Ron knew how much faster the high-speed rail was than the sea, so he directly rejected the plan of taking the boat all the way there via the permanent pointer and chose to take the sea train. At the same time, the reason why this old warship was empty was that it had so many problems that it just happened to be repaired. For this reason, Ron had already brought out the red coral that Vice Admiral Doughtua gave him. If there was really no other way, he could use it to pay off the debt. Anyway, it's not the headquarters of the Navy, so no one will know if it is sold, and it won't offend anyone. The sun was shining and the breeze was gentle. Ron was leaning back in a beach chair, chewing on the steak carefully prepared by the chef from the kitchen team while complaining to Dante who was waving his sword not far away. "Can you believe that it takes 2.5 months to travel by sea? Puke is a famous food capital of the Grand Line after all. Can't the Marshal set up a branch there?" He finally understood why the Straw Hat Pirates caused so much trouble, but no Navy figure important enough had ever stepped in to destroy them, because the ocean was so huge and vast. A mission often takes several months, and by the time the branches receive the order to intercept them, no one knows where they have gone. The Straw Hat Pirates were just like gorillas, they would move after each shot and it was impossible to catch them. Looking at the original work, apart from Aokiji who determined their route based on the Alabasta incident and blocked them on the deserted island in advance, only Tyrant Bear found the Straw Hat Pirates by flying with the meat puff fruit. It is no wonder that the 5 elders agreed to the system of 7 warlords of the sea. Although the 7 warlords are bastards, they have made up for the positions that the Navy cannot take care of. This is a difficult problem caused by the combination of technological level, productivity, and world environment, and it is almost unsolvable. Perhaps there is a solution, such as the specialty of the Seven Water City, the sea train. Ron narrowed his eyes, picked up the ice cup and took a sip. 3778, 3779. Dong Te didn't know what Ron was thinking. He silently counted the number of times he swung his sword, then rolled his eyes at Ron. "Major General Ron, you also know that the food city is very prosperous. Don't you know the tricks inside?" Dong was very envious of Ron. As the developer of the lightning stimulation method, he could really become stronger just by lying down. However, he practiced hard all the time, but he couldn't even keep up with the progress. Comparing people to each other is really infuriating. What was even more abominable was that during his training time, Ron always came to watch, claiming that it was to improve his swordsmanship. After all, he had just obtained a precious sword. Ron even pointed to the sky with one hand, swearing by the thunderbolt that he was definitely not here to squeeze him. Conscience of heaven and earth! Thunder Man, you swear to be struck by lightning? Are you kidding me? Tisk, the pirate business. Ron smacked his lips and turned over. In any piece of land that can be called prosperous on the Grand Route, there is no black or white, only grey areas. After all, pirates are also human beings, they also need to eat, drink, defecate and urinate. Where there are needs, there are interests, and where there are interests, there are people who take risks. The Great Pirate Era was so magnificent, and there were countless pirates going out to sea. As long as you scrape a little oil and water from 1/10 of the pirates passing by, it would be a considerable fortune. Therefore, doing pirate business is not an isolated case, on the contrary, it is a common phenomenon. As a result, there were only a few Navy officers stationed in the huge food capital, and the main value of these Navy officers was to imprison criminals and serve as the headquarters spies. The deterrence of pirates almost entirely relied on the basic local defense force. In addition, the sea area there was complex, extreme climates were common, and ordinary islands were often swallowed by tsunamis. The Navy had no intention of establishing a branch in the nearby waters. And then, its disaster. This time, a certain pirate coalition army set their sights on the benefits of the food capital and launched a massive attack. The country was about to be destroyed, and without external aid, they could only struggle to support themselves while asking for help from the Navy headquarters thousands of miles away. As the saying goes, a chef who doesn't want to be a rich man is not a qualified pirate. The pirate coalition army set its sights on One Piece, and wanted to use the wealth of the food capital to build a force, provide soldiers, and then conquer the New World. It has to be said that these are a group of rebellious talents who know the truth that war is about money. But they didn't know that no matter how many ordinary people there were, they couldn't do anything to the four monsters at the top of the New World. In front of the real strong, ordinary people didn't even have the qualifications to be cannon fodder. However, Sengoku did not dispatch soldiers from the nearest branch, but instead let Ron, who was idle at the headquarters, take action. The implicit meaning was to delay as much as possible, as long as the pirates do not destroy the country. You are an undisciplined member state. Our navy fought to the death to eliminate the pirates, but you secretly engage in the pirate business and it is getting bigger and bigger. You deserve to die. Sengoku has disliked them for several years. It is not difficult to see from here that there is not a single fool among the high-ranking Navy officers who are easy to deal with. They are all insidious, cunning, and black-bellied bastards. Ron can guarantee that once he has dealt with the Pirate Alliance, his headquarters will immediately move into Puke and completely control the border defense of Puke. Then, he will argue with the other party in the name of protecting the allied countries while slowly eating away at Puke's open pirate business. Anyway, there is no need to rush. After realizing this, Ron simply turned around and went to the Seven Waters City, repaired the boat, and then took the sea train to make up for the lost time. At this moment, the messenger ran over, saluted and said, "Major General Ron, we can already see the Seven Water City, the navigation team requests instructions." "Well, all right. Inform everyone to prepare for docking. Everyone will disembark in batches. Drinking, making noise, and disturbing civilians are prohibited. Those who violate the order will be hung up and beaten." "Ah? You can't drink alcohol again." The messenger's face turned bitter and he looked sad. Major General Roan in front of him was like most of the Cap faction. He was not arrogant and could eat in the cafeteria with ordinary soldiers. He was friendly. After so many days, the people on the ship expressed their conviction. But there was only one thing that made all the soldiers feel very depressed. The Navy is a military unit, and the soldiers in the unit are all very good at drinking, including the generals themselves. Therefore, the requirements for soldiers who are not on duty are not strict in this regard. As long as it does not affect their work, no one cares if they drink a few glasses less. But Ron is different. He doesn't drink and believes that drinking will definitely cause trouble. For example, the night he was awarded the medal. Therefore, this warship added a rule that everyone can only drink moderate amounts of alcohol 1 day a week, and all crew members are divided into several groups, with fixed times and fixed quantities. You drink today, they drink tomorrow, and everyone takes turns. Anyone who drinks at other times will be hanged if caught. It's really hung up. Once, 7 or 8 soldiers stole a bottle of wine. After the cook went to complain, the group of people were tied to the mast and hung for a whole day. When they were let down, they were almost dehydrated like dried salted fish. Under severe punishment, this order was thoroughly implemented. Although soldiers with good physical fitness would not dehydrate after being hung for a day, they could not afford to be tied to the mast to dry in front of people and watched. Hearing the messenger's complaint, Ron smiled coldly and tapped his fingers on Lei Yun's hilt. "Oh? Any opinions?" "Gilu. No. Make sure your orders are obeyed." The messenger was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat and ran to deliver the message without saying a word. By the way, when Ron was experimenting with thunderclouds, he accidentally released thunder that enveloped the entire war beast, and the guys on the ship were all grilled like salted fish for a day. Since then, many people have suffered cardiac arrest and cold sweats when they see Ron. The pain of having electricity repeatedly passed through their lower body is even more terrible than being stabbed by a sword. After satisfying the soldier's appetite, Ron turned around and asked, "Dante, are you going to guard the boat or go out and play?" "Don't, Major General Ron, we are not here to play, we are on a mission." "Hey, hey. The train to the food capital goes back and forth once every 10 days, and the last one was only 7 days ago. What can you do in these 3 days?" "Don't." Chapter 89 Arrival. Half an hour later, the huge war beast stopped at the largest dock number 1 of the Carrera Shipbuilding Company in the Seven Water City. Upon hearing the news, the mayor of the Seven Water City, Bing Shan, came with his trusted subordinates to greet him. The pirates who came here to repair and build ships hid in the dark, casting horrified eyes at the huge steel monster in front of them. "What is that? Is it really a ship? So big. It's big enough to be called land, right? Is this the Navy headquarters warship? This is terrifying." It is worth mentioning that the Seven Waters City, like the Food City, belongs to a grey area. They do business with ordinary people and also help pirates repair ships. The shipbuilding technology of Water 7 City is well known in the Grand Line. The pirate king Rogers Orl Jackson was built by the legendary shipwright Tom using the treasure tree atom. What a great celebrity effect! The ships of One Piece are all built here. How can ordinary people tolerate this? Where there is demand, there is interest, and where there is interest, there is business. This is how the pirate business in Water 7 started. However, even the O.R. Jackson from One Piece cannot compare to the war beast in terms of size. One ship makes an army. This is no joke. Looking at the steel mountain in the port, and then looking at their own small sailboat that is not even up to the waterline of others, countless pirates became discouraged and had serious doubts about whether they could become the pirate king. This is the deterrent power of the Navy headquarters. As giant monsters that suppress the entire ocean, even if they say nothing and do nothing, their mere presence can bring unspeakable panic to the enemy. Welcome to the Seven Waters City. I am the mayor of the Seven Waters City, Iceberg. Teams of armed marines stood up straight and marched in step to disperse the crowd and clear a passage. 2 young men wearing cloaks of justice walked down from the ship and walked along the passage to the iceberg. There was a hint of doubt in Bing Shan's eyes, especially the golden stars on Ron's epaulets, which made Bing Shan even more curious. Such a young major general, he seemed to have heard of. Iceberg's characteristic is his always neatly trimmed short purple hair and a beard that never seems to be shaved clean. Ron walked up to him with a thundercloud in his hand. After continuously developing his potential, his height has increased again and is now close to 2 meters and 5. He can look down on most of the people present, including Iceberg. Are you the Iceberg Mayor? For some reason, the calm tone of voice made Bing Shan feel an invisible pressure. Yes, it's me. What can I do for you, Major General? Bing Shan asked silently with cold sweat on his face. Ron did not answer in a hurry. He slowly moved his gaze, passing over the 2 CP9 undercover agents in the crowd behind the Iceberg, and then stopped at the outlines of the sailboats covered with tarpaulins in Dock No, which seemed to be about to be overhauled. Then Ron smiled, a bright and sunny smile. My red coral is saved. I've heard for a long time that Master Tom's disciple is an expert in shipbuilding. Today I see that his reputation is well deserved. Haha, it's all thanks to Master's good teaching. Major General, I have prepared a dinner at the mansion, I hope you will honor me with your presence. Ron laughed and Bing Shan could only laugh along, but when he saw the cold light flash in Ron's eyes, Bing Shan's heart tightened and he knew that he was going to bleed heavily. The 7 water capitals were all allies, and the shipping industry accounted for more than 80% of the island's economy, so the Navy had always turned a blind eye to their blatant repairs for pirates. But whenever someone came and happened to come across a pirate ship under repair, they would inevitably spend money to avoid disaster. I thought that the young Ron would not be as shameless as those old Navy veterans, and maybe he couldn't even see it at all, but Bingberg obviously underestimated Ron's vision and overestimated Ron's bottom line. When it comes to shamelessness, under the entire world government, no one dares to claim to be first if Ron is second to none. CP0 can attest to this with his chest padded. Eat well, eat well. Ron looked at Bing Shan as if he was being taken advantage of, then called out to the back, Dante. Arrange a few people to follow me. The rest of you are free to move around except for those who stay behind. You must return to the camp before 8 o'clock. Also, whoever dares to drink alcohol privately, I will skin him and throw him into the sea. Gilu. The soldiers shuddered. Dong smiled bitterly and shook his head, then agreed to make the arrangements. However, he comforted the soldiers by saying, I won't really skin you. The Major General is not that cruel. At most, I'll make a few cuts and dip them in water. Hiss. Now the soldiers are even more resentful. It would be better if you didn't comfort them. This is like rubbing salt into the wound. Led by Bing Shan, Ron walked towards the center of the 7 waters. In the crowd, Rob Lucci and Keiku, who were still ordinary boatmen, looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. The judicial island was so close to the Navy headquarters that they had known Ron's name for a long time. As for this new Major General with great achievements, they, like CP0, had the idea of not provoking him if possible. But they don't want to cause trouble because they know each other inside and out, but Ron doesn't know who they are. Others couldn't understand why Ron looked at them just now, but the two of them knew very well that Ron was doubting them. For a truly strong person, even if they don't have the observation haki, they can still tell who is strong and who is weak. When a monster with a Dao power comparable to that of a rear admiral emerges from a bunch of scum whose combat power is less than 5, anyone would take a second look. He should have noticed our abnormality. To prevent him from getting suspicious, let Khalifa contact him privately to show him that we are one of them. Rob Lucci said to Keiku, who nodded and left the crowd calmly, heading towards the famous tavern street in 7 Waters. It doesn't matter if Ron finds out. He is a Marine. Although he has a bad relationship with the CP organization, he dare not actively disrupt the mission. The only thing I'm afraid of is that Ron will find it strange and ask Bing Shan about it. Then Bing Shan will ask, what? I have such a powerful employee under my command. Then their disguise would be in vain. It is only the 1515th year of the Haiwan calendar. Lucci and the other 2 are not yet the 5 foremen of the future No. Shipyard, and they have not shown any extraordinary fighting ability in front of the Iceberg. If the iceberg finds out that the new employees are actually masters among masters, it goes without saying what the iceberg will think. Although they were unhappy that Spondam threw them into the Seven-Water City to hide indefinitely just because of a clue of a rootless duckweed, the loyalty of the CP9 who had been trained since childhood was unquestionable, and they would never allow the mission to fail. Of course, Rob Lucci was still rather naive at this time, thinking that anything could be easily caught by CP9. However, in reality they had been lurking in Water 7 for 5 full years, until the Straw Hat Pirates appeared and ended this undercover mission with a great defeat. On the other hand, following the iceberg, everyone came to a tall white building. Bing Shan is the mayor of the Seven Water City and the president of Carrera Company. The headquarters of Carrera Company is the mayor's office. This is no longer a collusion between officials and businessmen, but an integration of officials and businessmen. It is simply unreasonable to put it in other places, but Bing Shan is extremely loved and admired by the citizens of Water City, so no one cares about these things. Major General, please. Bing Shan led the way for Ron with a smile. When they arrived at the decorated restaurant, he turned to his secretary Khalifa and said, "Khalifa, notify the kitchen to prepare the dishes. And by the way, check if my treasured red wine has been decanted." "Understood, Mayor." The charming and slim blonde Khalifa held the folder in front of her chest with her right hand, squeezing her huge and full chest into waves, and at the same time pushed the glasses on the bridge of her nose with the tip of her left index finger, and answered in a capable manner. "Mayor Iceberg is so lucky. I also want a beautiful woman to approach me with ulterior motives." Ron smacked his lips and said with a smile, "But there's no need for wine. Drinking will only delay things." Bing Shan was suddenly startled, remembering the order Ron gave to the soldiers in the dock, and laughed at himself. Yes, drinking will delay things. "Major General, please take a seat." "Call me Ron, Major General, or something like that sounds too distant. After all, we are not familiar with each other, so I feel embarrassed to do it." "Ron." Suddenly, Bingberg's memory became clear. A few weeks ago, a major event happened in the Navy headquarters. A new recruit killed the Hell Island crab that nearly destroyed the world more than a decade ago and was awarded the rank of Rear Admiral. This event was published in the world news and caused a sensation for a while. However, most people thought that this was a trick by the Navy to give the guy named Ron a suitable reason to be promoted from a new recruit to a Rear Admiral. After all, if the Hell Island crabs died so easily, would the Navy have had to make such great sacrifices? Therefore, in the eyes of outsiders, Ron is a big shot with a powerful backstage, who can make the Navy headquarters open a back door for him. However, the fact is that Ron really did such an incredible thing. At the same time, not only does he not have any backing, he even said, still very poor. He was so poor that he had to extort money to make a living. The salaries of naval admirals were paid annually, and before the end of the year, the only Bailey Ron had was what he got from selling emeralds. However, although most people looked down on Ron for getting in through the back door, no one had the right to look down on him. After all, among the countless speculations, there is always one thing that cannot be avoided. The Navy made an exception and gave Ron the position of Major General through the back door in order to completely tie him down. Because Ron is the user of the Thunder Fruit who has disappeared for hundreds of years. The owner of the most powerful natural devil fruit. With such a powerful force in hand, not only is the Navy willing to offer a Major General position to win him over, but countless kingdoms are willing to offer their princesses to win him over. The 3 admirals of the Navy often appear in the Grand Line to carry out missions. They are like gods and demons, and their concept of the strongest combat power is well known to the world. As a member of the Grand Line who makes a living, if they don't understand the meaning of the 3 words natural system, it would be a joke. It turned out to be Lord Ron. "I'm sorry I didn't recognize you. Please forgive me." Only then did Bing Shan no longer dare to underestimate Ron. The various legends about the thunder fruit made him realize that even if the other party was not a major general from the headquarters of the navy, the devil fruit alone was enough to destroy the entire Water 7 city. In this world, only strength is king. On the other side, while Bing Shan and Ron were chatting slowly while waiting for the dinner to start, Khalifa walked out of the kitchen and put the Den Den Mushi into the mysterious dimension in front of her chest, and calmly turned into a dead end. At the same time, a round door suddenly opened on the grey brick wall. Bruno, a CP9 member disguised as a bar owner, stood behind the door and handed Khalifa a note, then said, "Be careful, the other party has discovered Lucci and the others. You must contact him before he asks Bing Shan to avoid mission failure." Khalifa scanned her mission and pouted, "We've been discovered. How long have we been hiding?" Sure enough, men are all big pigs. Chapter 90 CP9 Exposed. In order to get close to Bing Shan, Khalifa designed a plan to get rid of the previous secretary, and then memorized relevant knowledge by rote, and finally stood out from a group of competitors and became Bing Shan's personal secretary. After such a lot of trouble, she finally achieved her initial goal. Before she could start the investigation, Bruno told him that Lucci was exposed. "What are you doing? Are you kidding me?" Khalifa, who was in a bad mood, exuded an aura that kept strangers away. She walked back to the restaurant wearing high heels and twisting her waist. At this time, Ron was already chatting happily with Bing Shan. Calculating the time, Ron complained with a hint of meaning. "Don't mention it. Although I'm a major general, I'm still a newcomer. The warships the Marshal gave me are all old, with problems everywhere. A few days ago, water entered the cabin. Isn't that infuriating? It is indeed speechless that a dignified Navy warship has water in its cabin, but even if it is old, it is still the largest model of the Navy warship, a war behemoth. How many generals in the headquarters have worked hard for many years and still cannot own a war behemoth as their main ship, but you have one as soon as you leave the camp, so what are you still fussing about? Let's have some AC knowledge, okay?" Bing Shan was speechless for a moment, not knowing how to respond. But he reacted immediately and took a breath. "Wait, this is the Seven Waters City, I'm the boss of the Carrera Shipbuilding Company, and the Navy's warships need repairs. What does Ron mean?" As expected, Ron didn't want Bing Shan to answer, and said to himself, "Speaking of which, Mayor Bing Shan, your company's business is pretty good. Just now, there were at least 8 ships blocked by tarpaulins in the dock that needed major repairs, if not 10, right?" Dong was drinking the appetizer soup spoonful by spoonful at the position where Ron was standing. Hearing this, he lowered his head silently, not daring to look around. It's such an obvious rip-off, how shameful. He knew that Ron was poor and wanted to save money for ship repair. It was understandable that the iceberg hit the gunpoint when the Seven Waters City was doing pirate business. But they were not generals of the branch, and the Emperor was far away. They were generals of the headquarters, Marineford. If the Marshal knew about this, they would all be in trouble. "I'm so desperate. I really want to change my boss." Dong suddenly regretted his decision. Bing Shan was also quite speechless about Ron's straightforwardness. However, he had prepared himself mentally, and there was no trace of embarrassment on his face. He said without hesitation, "Major General, you have made great contributions to maintaining peace. How can you go out to sea on a damaged warship? In this case, it happens that we have some experience in repairing ships. Please allow me to contribute my humble help, Major General Ron." "Hey! How can this be possible? I don't have the money to pay you." "Major General Ron, you are too polite. Water City 7 is a member of the world government, and the Navy is also an organization under the world government. We are all family. There is no point in talking about rewards for doing a small favor." "Well said, we are one family and should not have different opinions. Come, Mayor Iceberg, I will toast you with tea instead of wine." "How dare you do that? Major General Ron, please take a seat. I'll drink first as a sign of respect. Gurgle, tun tun tung. Dong really couldn't bear to watch it anymore. These two people were more hypocritical than the other. They said sweet words one after another and were shameless to the extreme. However, repairing the warships would be beneficial to them, so they simply watched and pretended not to hear anything. At this moment, Dong suddenly smelled a fragrant breeze at the tip of his nose. The vigilance he developed on Hell Island told him that someone was approaching his back quickly. The person is not good. Dong narrowed his eyes, murderous intent filled his eyes. Clang! Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Dong drew his sword in an instant, and the ferocious beast aura accumulated after the training on Hell Island was released without any concealment. Those with weak strength could not breathe in the face of this murderous aura, and only the bright sword light was left in their eyes. Dong Ti's eyes were cold, and his sharp gaze like a knife swept across the vital parts of the woman in front of him. He snorted coldly, "Who are you?" Gurgle. Khalifa's hands and feet were stiff, and cold sweat was pouring down her forehead. The sharp blade was less than 3 centimeters away from her nose. With a light breath, she could smell a foul odor coming from the tip of the blade. It was a unique smell left by the mixture of blood, grease, and bone marrow on the blade and infecting the metal. Isn't he a marine? Why is the murderous aura stronger than that of a pirate? What Khalifa didn't know was that the officers who came out of the headquarters recruit camp were completely different from the ordinary navy they were used to seeing. The murderous aura accumulated from the constant fighting for survival and the brutality engraved into the bones could not be erased in just over a month. Nowadays, many people are like Dante. They look at everyone as if they are prey, eat like wild animals guarding their food, and are alert to the surroundings with fierce eyes, which is chilling. Dante recognized who the woman in front of him was, but the other party's movements when approaching were obviously not ordinary people. He turned around and drew his sword very quickly, but the other party was able to barely stop. Although he didn't want to kill easily, he could also see that the other party was unusual. This is a master. Locked in by Dante's eyes as if he were looking at her prey, Khalifa didn't dare to move an inch. She was very sure that if she made a move that was considered a threat by the other party, the sword would cut her aorta without hesitation. This is a wolf. Fortunately, the frightened iceberg stood up in a panic and shouted nervously, "Khalifa! What are you doing? Apologize to the major." Khalifa had a look of being screwed. She just wanted to take the opportunity to pounce on Dante and tell him her identity, but she didn't expect Dante to be so sensitive. Facing Dante's gaze, Khalifa was in a dilemma and scolded the culprits Rob Lucci and Keku. However, Bingshan's move of retreating to advance just gave her a way out, so she acted like a little girl, with just the right amount of panic on her face, and said to Dante, "I'm sorry, Major, I didn't stand firmly and disturbed you all." After saying that, Khalifa raised her left foot calmly so that everyone could see the high heels with broken heels on her feet. "Major General Ron, Major Dante, I am responsible for not disciplining you properly. I apologize to both of you. Iceberg is weak and can't notice the difference of Khalifa. He is afraid that Khalifa will be held accountable, so he quickly apologizes to Ron and the others. Due to the death of their master Tom, Iceberg, and his junior Carter Fram, who goes by the alias Frankie, have no good impression of the world government. Even the Navy, who are their minions, are labeled as gangsters by them." Dong remained calm and looked at Ron. The latter paused for a moment on Khalifa and said with a smile, "Put down the sword, don't be so sensitive. The 7-Water City Sea train goes directly to Judicial Island, and Judicial Island goes directly to the Navy headquarters. Who dares to attack our Navy here?" Sorry, I got too excited." Dong narrowed his eyes, sheathed his sword, and nodded to Khalifa. "Is the 7-Waters City safe?" "No, it is not safe either." But out of trust in Ron, even though he was full of doubts, Dong chose to obey the order. "Ha ha ha! Iceberg wiped the sweat from his forehead and tried to smooth things over. Yes, the Seven Waters City is not far from the Navy headquarters. It only takes 1 day at most by sea train. We are very safe here. Come, Major Dante, the dinner is here, please take a seat. Nodding, Dong pulled out a chair expressionlessly. Just as he was about to sit down, he suddenly noticed that behind him, where Khalifa had just stood, 3 characters were outlined with light black scratches, CP9. Judging from the thickness of the scratches, it is the heel of a high-heeled shoe. Dong was startled and looked up at Ron, but found that the latter did not look away, but just took out a handkerchief and wiped the corners of his mouth that were stained with sauce. Did he already see it? When? Damn it! The gap is getting bigger and bigger. Dong secretly clenched his fists, sat down, and wiped off the mark with his leather shoes. Near the door, Khalifa breathed a sigh of relief when she saw this scene. Men are all big pig hooves. Men are all big pig hooves. Important things should be said 3 times. Chapter 91 Showdown. After having a good meal and a few drinks, Ron politely declined Bingshan's repeated requests to stay and left the mayor's building with Bingshan's farewell. The Seven Waters City was still beautiful under the moonlight, and the travelers and merchants coming and going brought vitality to the place. On the way back, Dong wanted to ask several times, but Ron stopped him with his eyes. In this way, the group of people walked through the bustling streets without saying a word and came to a secluded alley. At this moment, Ron suddenly stopped, took out a cigar from his pocket, and lit it with the high-voltage current between his thumb and finger jumping like an elf. "Come out, Miss Khalifa. If you have anything to say, just explain it here." Since the last time he said that to Zifa, the old man has slowly reduced the number of times he smokes. He knows his body well. The hidden injuries from his youth have gradually erupted as he gets older. His asthma symptoms are becoming more and more obvious, and his strength is not as good as before. Even if he doesn't consider himself, in order to teach his last disciple Ron, Zifa has also started to quit smoking. Since Zifa quit smoking, all the stocks became Ron's bargain. The various high-quality cigars allowed Ron to smoke to his heart's content without any worries. His self-healing ability becomes more and more abnormal as his strength increases. Now, even smoking sulfur can't kill him. After Ron finished speaking, the alley remained silent, as if Ron was just talking to the air, which was a little awkward. Seeing this, Ron was not in a hurry. He sneered, and an electric current seeped into the ground from under his feet, turning into thousands of snakes, illuminating the night sky, and rushing forward fiercely. Zzz. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several shadows immediately rushed out from the darkness and landed in front of Ron. Ron found that after Khalifa, the weakest one, stood firm, her hands and feet kept shaking, obviously injured by the electric current. Dong drew his sword and called out, "Be careful! Protect the Major General!" Clang! Click, click, click! The soldiers who were chosen to be Ron's guards were all well trained. There was no nonsense. As soon as the bolt was pulled, the muskets were aimed. As long as the enemy made any unusual movement, they would shoot and repel the enemy without hesitation. No matter how big the gap in strength between them and Ron is, and who will protect whom if a fight really breaks out, the guards' duty is to protect their superiors. If they want to attack Ron, they must first step over their dead bodies. No. 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 Please don't misunderstand, we have no ill intentions. The speaker is not a person, but a pigeon on the shoulder of the cloaked man in the middle. It is called Hidori and is Rob Lucci's pet. Although he is a serious and cold-blooded guy, Lucci often uses ventriloquism to cooperate with Hidori to say some ridiculous words and make various exaggerated expressions, which can be regarded as a kind of contrast. We are members of CP9 under the world government, carrying out a mission in water. CP9. Does this organization really exist? As a member of the family, Dong had heard of the CP9 branch, but because the other party had always been mysterious, even he could not tell the truth from the false. He was unsure for a moment and turned to look at Ron. Of course Ron knew they were the real deal, but he couldn't point it out directly, otherwise he wouldn't be able to explain the source of the intelligence, so he smiled and asked, "CP9? Sorry, I've never heard of it. Prove it to me, or I'll let you know what happens when you pretend to be a government agent." Boom! A bolt of lightning shot out from his finger, striking the stone slab in front of Rob Lucci's shoes in a flash. With so many people present, no one could see the movement of the lightning. They could only detect the existence of the attack through the light spots left on their retinas after the thunder. When the thunder dissipated, the hard stone slab was charred black, and the center was shattered beyond recognition. The thunder fruit has unparalleled destructive power. Rob Lucci was unmoved by Ron's protest. He had a plan for the conversation in front of him, which was also the reason why he showed up tonight. He said to the tall female cloaked figure beside him, "Khalifa, use the finger gun on me." Khalifa's cloak was completely unnecessary. Her chest was the only one that was bulging among the three people, and with the familiar smell of perfume, even Dante could tell who she was. Khalifa didn't hesitate to take off her cloak and pushed up her glasses with her fingertips. Death finger gun whip. She swung her arm, and her arm twisted as if it had no bones, like a dancing rope. The powerful force was locked between the muscles and bones. She stretched out her index finger, and with the power accumulated by swinging her arm, she hit Rob Lucci's heart. The power of this move was comparable to the high-powered flintlock rifle developed by the Navy. If it were an ordinary person, his heart would be pierced. But since Rob Lucci dared to let Khalifa attack him, he must have his own guarantee. He kept his hands in his pockets, and when the gun was pointed at him, his muscles suddenly tensed up. Iron! Boom! The fingers collided with the chest, and the flesh and blood body actually made a steel-like vibration. The cloak and casual suit on Rob Lucci's chest were stabbed by the high-speed finger gun and smoked, but looking through the clothes, there was not even a red spot left on the muscles inside. The highly accomplished 6 styles of the Navy, iron blocks and finger guns. There is no more powerful explanation than these 2 moves. This is the secret of the Navy, and there are people in the sea who can imitate it. Except for a certain rubber monkey. Clap clap clap. Wonderful piece of iron. Ron bit his cigar and clapped his hands, signaling the soldiers to put away their weapons. Rob Lucci lived up to his title of the strongest man in 800 years. With the defense provided by this iron block alone, he could walk sideways in the first half of the Grand Line. Hey! Since he's an agent of the world government, then whatever he does has nothing to do with our Navy. Dante, go back to sleep. Blowing out a puff of smoke, Ron turned around and left without saying anything. Rob Lucci was a little surprised by Ron's straightforwardness and warned, "Don't mention our existence to anyone, Major General Ron, or you will bear the consequences." "Don't worry, I hate trouble the most." Ron waved his hand and led the crowd away. When they disappeared at the end of the street, Khalifa asked in disbelief, "Is it that simple? He just left like that? What else can we do?" Cackle, who had been playing the role of a wooden man, pulled down his hood and shrugged, "We are CP9, Khalifa. It will be bad for him to go against us. Of course, we will just go our separate ways. Is that right?" Khalifa muttered nonchalantly, feeling that it was somehow unreal. From the part where Ron tried to extort money from Bing Shan, it was clear that this new Major Admiral, who was so powerful in the Navy headquarters, was no ordinary person. And the Major beside him, Quinn Dante, was also extraordinary. "Okay, go back first, Khalifa, don't let Bing Shan get suspicious." Rob Lucci stopped the two from talking, then looked in the direction where Ron disappeared and said calmly, "He is a smart man, and smart people know what they should do." After saying that, he took the lead in pulling down his hood, stepped on the moon, and quickly disappeared into the night. Keku and Khalifa looked at each other, pulled down their hoods as well, and disappeared on the spot. But they didn't notice that Rob Lucci's hands, which had been in his pockets from beginning to end, were now oozing with cold sweat. If that move hits me, can I withstand it? Recalling the lightning attack just now, Rob Lucci secretly thought about the simulated battle and finally came to the conclusion, if the two sides went to war, he would die. In the eyes of outsiders, it was Ron who chose to give in because of the priority of power, and CP9 was the winner. But in Lucci's heart, he was spared a life because Ron was too disdainful to attack him. Being weak is a sin, and Lucci, who has carried this out as his life creed, suddenly and sadly discovered that he is actually part of the original sin. Navy Headquarters, Rear Admiral Ron. You heard nothing and saw nothing tonight, got it? Understand? Very good, now disband. After Dong warned the soldiers, he walked over to Ron and asked, Major General Ron, do you think there is anything happening in the Seven Waters that is worthy of CP9's dispatch? As a real hidden agent, even though they are close at hand, most of the Navy still doesn't know the existence of CP9. Such a mysterious organization suddenly appeared in the Seven Waters city and lurked around Mayor Bingshan. What could have made them mobilize so many troops? Of course it's for the ancient weapon Pluto, my little cutie. Ron rolled his eyes. Dong was a good person in every way. With him around, I could basically live a carefree life without him having to worry about trivial matters. But he had one flaw that was very annoying, and that was his habit of asking questions until he got to the bottom of things. Even a blind man could see that this matter was of great importance, and CP9 was warning the Navy not to interfere, which was why Ron left so decisively, because he didn't want to be targeted by the CP organization right after he had accomplished his mission. But Dante knew this but still couldn't restrain his curiosity and wanted to find out the truth. Ron counted with his fingers and found that Dong was indeed counting cats. Life goes on, and so does death. Stop asking about the shitty things of those sinister people. I'm going to practice. Do you want to come? No. Bye. Dong shuddered, not daring to ask any more questions, and disappeared in a flash. Since he had awakened the rudiments of armament hacking first, in order to catch up with Ron, Dante had been focusing on improving armament hacking during this period. However, armament hacking focuses on martial arts, and the progress is extremely slow if you work behind closed doors. So, he took the initiative to challenge Ron, hoping to improve through fighting. Then he sadly discovered that he had really been blinded by greed. As long as Ron mentions the speed advantage of the Thunder Man, he will be a moving sandbag. Moreover, Ron never showed mercy when he fought. He knocked him out and threw him into the sea in just a few moves. After a few times, Dong no longer dared to practice with Ron. Ron sneered at this and said, "What's the reason for you to improve your armament hacking? Don't you have any idea why I was so ruthless?" Chapter 92 Turbulence in the Water City. After dealing with the cat-like Dong, Ron came to the training room on the bottom floor of the warship. This is a training room made entirely of steel. There are densely packed, irregular bullet holes on the walls, which are enough to make a trypophobic patient faint as soon as he walks in. Due to the limited area of the warship, Ron could only do some basic training during his time on the ship. The ability of the fruit with a wide range could not be deeply developed, and the armament domineering required more combat coordination, so the only things he could practice were observation domineering and the 6 styles of the Navy. This training room was specially renovated by him for the purpose of practicing observation hacking. For this purpose, he dismantled the artillery equipment in an underground training room of the recruit camp and installed it here in half a month. However, since there were no qualified scientists on the ship, the bullet holes were distributed in a random pattern after the move, as if they were chewed by a dog. It was so low level that it exploded. I can only say that it is worthy of being called Vegapunk. Even after being messed up like this, it can still be used after being powered on. Let's start. After pressing the start switch, Ron threw away his cape and suit, wearing only a pair of shorts, and stood in the middle of the field. Then, he picked up the sweat-soaked cloth on the ground and wrapped it around his eyes. Suddenly, his vision was completely blocked, and everything in front of him was pitch black. Ron could only rely on his memory to determine his position. Ding ding, start. Emotionless synthetic sound effects echoed in my ears, and the next moment, shells popped out from the launcher. Paper drawing. Hearing the sound of the wind, Ron immediately used paper painting, which was similar to the observation haki. He calmed his mind and tried to sense the changes in airflow through his skin. His body was soft as if he had no bones and was as light as a feather, and he avoided the incoming shells. Thump! As more and more shells came, they kept colliding with each other and deviating from the planned route. This made it extremely difficult for Ron to dodge. In one careless move, a ricocheting shell hit his nose, causing Ron's head to tilt back. In order to increase the pressure on himself, he replaced the original small steel ball with a rubber one. For a natural ability user, steel is the least threatening thing. Moreover, the rubber ball is full of elasticity, and it will not stop beating immediately after the impact. It will bounce around and it will be more difficult to judge the flight trajectory. I can never catch inspiration. Ron tried his best to dodge while carefully feeling the slight vibration in the air. Unremitting training did not allow him to master the observation haki easily, but his paper painting skills improved rapidly under constant pressure. What's missing? 45 degrees in front, underarm. Ron raised his hand to avoid it. 120 degrees behind me, my heart. Turn sideways and avoid. 180 degrees to the side. No. It bounced. Ron suddenly stopped dodging and bent his knees. The two rubber balls collided and simultaneously broke away from their intended flight paths, heading straight for his face. Ron just happened to squat at this moment to avoid the impact. No. There's more. Ron's scalp suddenly tightened, and the mysterious tactile sensation that had appeared many times before filled his mind, allowing him to clearly see that the two rubber balls flying over his head collided again, and the slower one was hit by the inertia of its companion and turned around and hit his back again. Hey, did you use the Uchiha Shuriken throwing technique? Ron's mouth twitched speechlessly, and he bent his knees to gather strength and jumped lightly. Boom! The rubber ball hit the ground, bouncing across the floor like a stone skipping on water, and finally stopped moving when it hit the wall. Boom, boom, boom. But at this time, because his body was floating in the air, shells flew towards him at a high speed, hitting his body with dull sounds. Sure enough, that strange sense of touch just now should be the effect of observation haki, but the sound produced by the body movement interrupted my perception again. Thinking of this, Ron tore off the black cloth in front of his eyes, and a heart-pounding high-voltage electric current wrapped around his body. Sizzle! Boom! An invisible surge erupted, and the rubber ball with the speed of a bullet could not get close at all, and was forced to stay in the air. Seizing the opportunity, Ron teleported to the control instrument at the door, opened the protective cover, and pressed the stop button. Training is over, hit rate is 0.3%. Ron. Because it was stolen and no one dared to show it to the public, no one knew how to change the voice of the instrument, and it has continued to this day. This 0.3 hit rate is probably due to the rubber ball being damaged by its own collision. Hey! I'll call the teacher tomorrow to ask. I've already touched the threshold, but I can't maintain the effect if I move my body. What's the point of using this observation haki? Ron looked annoyed and smoothed his hair. That night, on the tavern street in the Seven Waters City. Due to the arrival of the headquarters navy, some areas of the island are more lively than before. Pirates and criminals only dare to hide in bars and casinos, waiting for the navy to leave. Cats catch mice and soldiers catch thieves. This is nature. No matter how arrogant the pirates are, after seeing the horror of the war beast, it is difficult to muster the courage to confront the headquarters navy head-on. At the same time, Bing Shan sent people to tell these guys that the navy had indeed discovered them, but would not take any action for his sake, so they were told to hide well and not to go out for the next few days. Most of the pirates only came here to repair their ships. The Seven Waters was only a short distance from the destination, the Sabayati archipelago, and no one wanted to fail here, so they stayed in the corner. However, since it was most of the pirates, there must be a small number of pirates who were very unwilling to accept this. Bang! The glass was smashed to pieces on the ground, attracting everyone's attention. Be afraid of shit. Hiccup. This was a fat little giant, more than 3 meters long and wide. He had a full face of brown beard, bare chest, and a bandit-like demeanor. He tied his long brown beard into 3 braids hanging down in front of his chest, which were now stained with wine. I am the future pirate king. How can a mere major general show off in front of me? Yes, the navy is just showing off its might with its warships and artillery. What's so great about that? The younger brother beside him flattered the drunk captain, knowing that he had to go along with what he said, otherwise he would be hit by the captain's sword. Hey, who is he? At the next table, a person asked his companion in a low voice. The great pirate T-Beard, whose bounty is 5,500 million berries, is said to have been exceptionally strong and sturdy since childhood. He accidentally killed the sheriff of the town and went out to sea as a pirate. 5,500 million baileys. That's an incredible number. The man took a deep breath. In the first half of the Grand Line, there were only a few people whose bounties exceeded 5,500 million. It was rare for a supernova to have a bounty of over million every year. In the world they could access, million baileys was already a big shot who could dominate a region. Who says it's not true? I heard that once they repair the ship, they will head to the Sabayati archipelago, aiming directly at the New World. The man who answered silently took a sip of liquor, his eyes sparkling. One day, we will meet in the New World. I swear. Here, the more T-Beard drank, the more he thought about it, the more upset he felt. If I had a big ship, I would have gone to the New World long ago. Maybe I was one of the supernovas a few years ago. Damn the navy, why not attack somewhere else but bombard my beloved beard? That's right. Those villains in the navy never dare to fight head-on, they only know how to sneak attack and destroy ships. People at a table in the distance suddenly slammed the table and stood up, cursing, with a lot of resentment in their words. In fact, the record pointer of the 7 water cities only takes 7 days to save, and most of the pirates who stay here for a long time come to repair their ships. Among the reasons for repairing ships, damage caused by naval bombardment is definitely the largest proportion. The closer they get to the end of the first half, the tighter the navy's defense becomes. The pirates gathered in the tavern drinking today have all had similar experiences to a certain extent. That's right. That's it. When T-Beard heard someone supporting his opinion, he laughed loudly. If the navy didn't have advanced shipbuilding technology, would I have to hide here and there? In a fight with swords and guns, I, T-Beard, am afraid of no one. Damn the navy! Shameless, trash! You're a worthless wimp! For a moment, the entire tavern was filled with curses against the navy. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted indignantly, in this case, why don't we burn that monstrous warship tonight and let that damned Major General have a taste of the consequences of having his ship destroyed? At the same time, tell the Navy headquarters that we are not to be trifled with. Swish! Everyone stopped cursing at once, and all eyes were focused on that person. The latter suddenly realized something and lowered his head quickly. Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. No. You are a talented kid. Why didn't I think of that? T-Beard walked over with heavy steps and grabbed it in his hand. An ordinary person is just a doll in front of T-Beard, and it is effortless to lift him up. He shook the unknown pirate in his hand, his eyes shining. It's before dawn, it's the time to relax the defense. Just a few barrels of oil and dynamite, and a fire can burn it. And if we burn that monster-like warship, I will be famous. Woohoo! Wealth, fame, power, these are the dreams that all pirates pursue throughout their lives. Now that an opportunity to become famous on the sea was before them, the pirates' eyes suddenly turned red and they breathed heavily through their nostrils. Captain T-Beard, you just experienced a naval battle, so you should not be running low on gunpowder, right? A pirate with an iron hook tied to his right hand stood up and said with an evil smile, "Do you need us to support you a little? Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. The more the better. Who else wants to join us? If we want to make a scene, we'll make a scene like hell." The pirates looked at each other, and some immediately chose to join in. "We, the Baileau pirates, want to join us. And us. So are we. Very good. Guys, follow me and burn the warships." Oh! At the bar counter of the tavern, CP9 member Bruno was slowly wiping the cups. He did not stop them to ask for payment. He just calmly watched the pirates pouring out of the door, then picked up the den mushi from behind the closet. "Hey, Liu Chi! I have a favor to do for that Major General Ron. What do you think?" Chapter 93 Dock Fire. T-Beard summoned pirates to burn Ron's warship? Are you sure? Sure, they've already left. Wait, let me think. In a dormitory for ship workers at dock number 1, Lucci looked at Keiku who had stood up while holding the den mushi. Suddenly, a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "No need. We know nothing about this matter." "Okay, all right." Bruno agreed and hung up the phone. Keiku, who was also awakened by the den mushi, came over and asked quietly, "Is this really okay, Lucci? If the warship is burned, the Navy headquarters will definitely send people to investigate the situation. By then, the 7 water cities will be even more chaotic, which will bring unnecessary trouble to the mission." Keiku's worries were not without reason. Ron alone could make them show up and explain the situation. If the headquarters got angry and came to investigate, would they still be able to complete their undercover mission? "Don't worry, those rubbish can't burn the war beast." Liu Chi had a sneer on his face. The war beast was rampant in the sea and was a real weapon of war for the Navy. If it was so easy to burn, who would look at it? Being a living target with its large size? T-Beard and the others had a good idea. It would be easy to succeed if they set fire to the ship when the Navy's defense was lax. But their confidence in burning the ship came from their knowledge of ordinary pirate sailing ships. They thought that any ship could be burned. What they didn't know was that the steel monster was built by Vegapunk, who had emergency backup plans for all means. If they wanted to burn it without exposing it, they would have to send Admiral Akainu. "So what do you mean?" Keiku picked up the hat next to the pillow and put it on his head. "Let's go put out the fire." Lucci stood up and looked towards the gate of dock number 1. Pirates are pirates after all. They will definitely not be satisfied with just burning a warship. If we perform well in this fire, Iceberg will definitely thank us. Under the hazy moonlight, dock number 1 was silent. But in Lucci's eyes, he already saw a sea of fire. Keiku shuddered for no apparent reason and nodded, "I see. There is a high-pressure water pump at the lumber mill. I'll go over there and get ready." After all, as the leader of CP9, Lucci's extraordinary strength is not only his strength, but also his resourceful mind and ruthless heart. At this time, Ron had gone to bed early. His cultivation had reached a bottleneck, so he relaxed for once. Soon, under the cover of the dark clouds, several figures with weapons jumped down from the wall, eliminated the security guards in the security room at the entrance of the dock, and opened the door. The obese T-Beard led a group of pirates into the dock and whispered, "Protect your own ship. If it catches fire, you can't blame others. Let's go to the harbor first to place explosives." Don't rush to light a fire. There's water everywhere, okay? The main buildings of Dock Number 1 are divided into a shipyard, a port, and a timber factory. Normally, after ships enter the dock from the port, the sea water is drained to facilitate the repair of the bottom of the ship. But now, in order to support the huge size of the war beast, the sea water in the dock has not been drained. The water from the port has flooded into the dock and can be seen everywhere, making it very difficult to start a fire. Don't worry, Captain T-Beard. Since everyone is here for the purpose of becoming famous, they will definitely not do anything reckless. Captain Hook smiled, licked his lips bloodthirstily, and swept his cold eyes over the pirates. If anyone ruins my plan to become famous, I will be the first one to not let him off. As a pirate with a bounty of 4,000 million berries, Captain Hook has the confidence. Woo ho ho! Very good, go and have fun by yourselves. Little ones, follow me to set off the explosives. T-Beard's fat body kept shaking, his eyes were full of ferocity. He raised his sword and called on the T-Beard pirates to move towards the warship. At dawn, the soldiers were exhausted and several soldiers on the war beast were holding their muskets, leaning limply on the support, and nodding off. Although there were only a few of them, they left a gap in their guard circle. Under the cover of the darkness before dawn, the T-Beard pirates groped their way to the bottom of the war beast little by little, clinging to the moss-covered hull. The plan was half successful if they could reach this point, because this was a real blind spot, and as long as they didn't make a big noise, no one would be able to find them. My God! This ship is so big! T-Beard had always thought that his more than 100-meter-long beard was already a large ship, but now that he had observed the war beast up close, he could see the difference. However, the bigger it is, the more necessary it is to blow it up. T-Beard led the way, carrying a gunpowder barrel on his left shoulder and two under his right armpit. He turned around and said, "Let's go. Put the explosives. Put them under the boat." He initially wanted to sneak onto the deck and place explosives to kill more Navy soldiers, but in the face of the terrifying size of the war beast, T-Beard had to give up this tempting idea. "Oh!" The younger brothers responded in low voices, their hands and feet shaking with excitement. They placed the gunpowder barrels close to the hull and pulled out the fuses to connect them. "This is the Navy headquarters warship. Blow it up and the whole world will know the name of the T-Beard pirates." As the pirates carefully placed explosives everywhere, Rob Lucci watched everything calmly in the shadows. Sure enough, in addition to warships, ordinary merchant ships and passenger ships are not spared. Under the merchant ships over there, Captain Hook was arranging his men to grease the wooden sailboats. He chopped off the heads of those merchant ship guards who were just for show, and they were unable to issue a warning until they died. Someone is heading to the lumber mill. I hope Keku doesn't alert them. Under the moonlight, a few small pirates who did not dare to compete with T-Beard and his men for the limelight changed their targets and ran towards the lumber mill, which was most prone to fire. All for fire, the pirates burst into unimaginable enthusiasm, and soon, the gunpowder was almost ready. Looking at the pile of wooden barrels in front of the warship, T-Beard swallowed his saliva. That amount of explosives is enough to kill him 7 or 8 times. He turned back decisively and said, "It's almost done, move away and prepare to light the fire." Yes. Just as T-Beard began to evacuate, a string of water drops suddenly fell from his head, soaking his head all over. T-Beard stopped and raised his head unhappily. Damn it! It's not going to rain now. If there were torrential rain at this moment, let alone igniting a fire, it would be a blessing from God that the gunpowder does not get damp. However, when T-Beard looked up, he did not see any rain. Instead, he saw a column of water shooting out from the deck and scattering in the air into a large cloud of water mist. On the war beast, the soldier who had just solved his personal problem shuddered, and like every man, he lowered his head and shook his weapon, and then, he and the T-bearded turtle looked at green beans and made eye contact. Pirates! Navy! The swinging indecent column stopped in mid-air, and water droplets flowed down his beard. At this moment, the two men's moods were unusually consistent. Grass. Fug. The younger brothers were stunned, looking at the captain who had been pissed in the face and had lost the ability to speak. When the navy on the deck found T-Beard and the others, he didn't even bother to pull up his pants and shouted decisively, "Enemy attack! There are pirates!" At the same time, he grabbed the musket leaning against the fence and fired a shot downwards without aiming. Boom! As the gunshots rang out, the entire dock number 1 fell into deathly silence in an instant. Then, "We've been discovered! Set off the fire! Set off the fire for me! Blow up these bastards!" T-Beard's face was ferocious, and the liquid spurting out of his beard was unclear whether it was saliva or something else. Upon hearing the shout, all the pirates took out their lighters without saying a word and threw them at the piles of explosives they had set up. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Boom. 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 Chapter 94 Broken Ship. Original title, Can My Old Ticket Get Me on Your Broken Ship? Dividing line. Oh no! There's a fire, come and put it out. Ah! There are pirates! The pirates are coming in! Hurry up and inform Mayor Iceberg! With a series of dense explosions, the dock was instantly thrown into chaos. The panicked ship workers were awakened by the explosions, and many of them were hacked to death by the oncoming pirates before they had time to ask about the situation. Afterwards, the crazy pirates threw torches into the house and continued to create chaos. Bang! Awakened by the explosion, Ron kicked open the door and stared at dock number 1 in flames with a very grim expression. However, Ron knew that getting angry now would be useless, so his expression slowly calmed down. He grabbed the soldier running past him and asked, "What happened?" "Major General Ron. There are pirates who have detonated explosives and are trying to blow up the warship. Major Dante is asking us to put out the fire." "Pirates? Blow up the warship?" Ron's eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. For a moment, invisible pressure erupted with his breathing. In the eyes of the soldiers, Ron's figure suddenly magnified infinitely, making their hands and feet numb. "Blow up a warship? You want to be famous, hey?" Ron, who was very smart, immediately understood the plan of these pirates. They wanted to use him as a stepping stone to fame. "Very good. You are so brave." He hadn't had such a strong murderous intent for a long time. The last time was on the Sky Island where he longed for the thunder fruit. The corners of his mouth slowly cracked, and his teeth, like white bones, flashed coldly in the moonlight. Ron gave the order. "Put out the water in the tank to put out the fire. Also, notify Dante immediately and take half of the men to block the gate. If anyone dares to let a pirate go, I will skin him alive. The rest of you should guard the warship. Anyone who dares to approach will be killed without mercy." "Yes." After receiving the order, the soldiers shouted at the top of their lungs and fled from Rowan in a panic. In their eyes, the Major General was not a human being at all, but a beast that would eat anyone it could. A monster that is completely enraged. Wow! Ron's anger made the soldiers burst out with 120% power. Soon, a large stream of water rushed out from the water tank in the center of the warship, along the internal passage of the hull, and rushed to the fire. T-Beard, who had just run out of the explosion range, looked back and was immediately shocked by the fresh water flowing out of the breach. "Oh no! The warship is not on fire, retreat quickly." If the warship caught fire, the Navy, who were busy putting out the fire, would naturally not care about them, but they never expected that the huge freshwater tank of the war beast could actively release floodwaters and extinguish every fire source on the warship along the channel. Without the danger of fire, the Navy, who were free, would never let them go. At this moment, suddenly, a loud crack sound echoed in dock number 1. Under the gaze of countless people, a huge gap appeared on the side of the war beast's hull, and the hard steel plate was twisted and deformed by its own weight, making an unpleasant whimpering noise, and it was about to fall to one side. T-Beard's mood went from hell to heaven in an instant. Although the warship was not burned, it was still considered damaged, right? Ron, who was about to attack, felt the vibration coming from the warship under his feet and frowned. What happened again? It's bad, Lord Ron. The water released from the water tank has caused the hull to become unbalanced. The old pillars can't bear the pressure and are beginning to collapse. This damn broken ship. Warring States IUN %, and Yuan. Ron's mouth twitched speechlessly, and he cursed the stingy Zhangguo in his heart. Bang! Click! Before he finished speaking, the warship shook violently, and the rotten pillars instantly turned into powder, causing the warship to fall sideways. The deck was in chaos, and no one knew what to do when faced with the war beast that was about to fall. Is the Navy's giant beast of justice going to fall here? Thinking of this, countless soldiers felt inexplicably sad. If the war beast really fell to the ground, it would be a shame that they would never be able to wash away in their lifetime. At the same time, it's Ron's too. Suddenly, a flash of lightning rushed out from the deck and landed on the top of a sailboat covered by oilcloth. Dont, who had just led his men off the boat to intercept the pirates, looked back and was shocked when he saw this scene. Major General Ron. Get out of there quickly. In front of the huge war beast, Ron was just a tiny bug. If it fell, Ron would definitely not be able to stop it. Even if the natural system would not be crushed to death, he was located above the sea water. If he was caught in the whirlpool and fell into the sea, he would be helpless. However, Ron ignored his anxious calls. Looking at the crack at the front end of the bottom of the ship, Ron thought silently. The explosives are placed near the port and not deep into the belly. If we can support this part, the remaining pressure will not be a concern. So. Ron glanced at the sailboat that everyone knew well and sneered, then borrow it. In the dock, Lucci, who was dealing with pirates and putting out fires everywhere, looked up as if he had realized something. He looked at Ron floating on the side of the sailboat and frowned silently. What does he want to do? This is the question that everyone present wants to know. Faced with the falling giant beast, is there any way Ron can stop it? If Ron knew what they were thinking, he would smile and say, of course. The war beast did not collapse as a whole, but the explosion destroyed the side structure, and the old pillars collapsed when the water tank was drained to put out the fire, thus losing balance. In the final analysis, only one corner lost its support. If there was something that could block the collapsed part like a stepping stone to support the balance of the warship, this steel beast would have survived. As it happens, Ron found the right support. That is the pirate ship in front of us. He grabbed the tarpaulin and pulled it back. The wide tarpaulin was thrown out and drifted away with the wind. As the tarpaulin faded, the black pirate flag on the mast was exposed in the firelight. Captain Hook was furious and roared, "Asshole! What do you want to do to my ship?" "Doing what?" Ron sneered and opened his bloody mouth, "Just like you, looking for a stepping stone." After saying that, Ron raised his foot in anger, and his bulging muscles burst through his trousers, revealing the steel-like muscles underneath. Then, in front of the horrified eyes of countless people, Ron turned on the spot, shouted, kicked into the wooden board on the side of the pirate ship, and lifted it up fiercely. "Get out of my way!" Boom! Click! No! Are you kidding? That's a human! As everyone watched in astonishment and horror, the pirate ship, which was more than 30 meters long, seemed to be pushed by the waves, creaking and wailing, and left the sea. The moonlight shone into the bottom of the ship, and was stirred into pieces in the conspicuous depression in the sea water. Not by destroying it, but by using brute force, kicking the pirate ship into the sky. What kind of terrifying power is this? Then, Ron repeated his old trick and turned around and kicked the stern of the pirate ship before it began to fall. Boom, boom. Suddenly, the pirate ship weighing more than 10 tons plunged into the gap on the side of the war beast at a terrifying speed. Its exaggerated weight seemed like an insignificant ball in front of Ron. Damn it! My ship! Captain Hook watched from a distance with gnashing teeth. For a pirate group, the pirate ship is their faith, their pillar, and a treasure that is more important than the captain. Now their pirate ship was kicked into the side of the warship by Ron. It is obvious that even if they pull it out, they can't continue to sail. Suddenly, he roared like crazy and rushed towards Ron. Hum! Laugh! The sword rings in the cold moon, and murderous intent bursts out. Ryu-style killing sword full moon. Suddenly, a figure that was not particularly tall turned into a ball of silver light and flashed past Captain Hook in an instant. Most people present could only see the bright moonlight like knife light drawing a disc in the air, and then the light and shadow disappeared, revealing Dong's tall and slender figure. He was seen holding the scabbard with one hand and slowly inserting the sharp knife back. Tsitsaizi, clang! Bang, crack! The next moment, with the crisp sound of the sword colliding, a streak of blood appeared on Captain Hook's nose. The blood quickly extended as soon as it appeared, and in the blink of an eye, it ran through his entire body. Under the horrified gaze of countless people, the two bodies fell to the ground, one on the left and one on the right. At this time, Dong slowly turned around and looked at the body of Captain Hook with an icy cold gaze. "Don't attack my superior without permission, you bastard!" A breeze blew, and the pirate's hands and feet were cold and they were speechless. In the distance, Ron, who was observing whether the pirate ship could withstand the pressure of the warship, rolled his eyes and said, "No wonder so many people are so passionate about the way of the swordsman. It really is the ultimate weapon for showing off." Tom died in 1512, and Frankie returned to the Seven Water City in 1516 of the Kayan calendar. The timeline of this book is 1515, so there is no role for Frankie. End of this chapter. Chapter 95 Ron enters. Chapter 95 Ron enters. He killed Captain Hook with a full moon slash that combined shaving, swordsmanship and armed color domineering. Dante was showing off happily when he suddenly heard Ron roaring, "What are you standing there in a daze for? I'm warning you, Dante, I'll fight you for every pirate that escapes. You decide for yourself." Don't. He turned around instantly, with a ferocious face, and roared to the soldiers around him, "I'm warning you. Every time I get beaten, I'll practice with you. Do whatever you want. Soldiers! Catch! Catch the pirates! Follow me! Whoever falls behind is a woman. Go and close the door. Don't let anyone escape." Dong Te followed suit, and the pressure from the layers of soldiers instantly made their eyes red. At the command, they burst out like a group of huskies on the loose, and rushed towards the pirates in the dock with the fighting power of mad dogs. The pirates, who were already scared to death by Dong Te's bloody slash, had no strength to resist and fled screaming. Click! The gap in the warship was like the bloody mouth of a sea king, biting into the pirate ship. A large number of wooden blocks were shattered and about to be bitten off. Ron frowned slightly, dodged and teleported to the side of another pirate ship, twisting his body and whipping again. Bang! 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 In the eyes of countless people who were turning from horror to numbness, Ron was like a hard-working bricklayer, carrying bricks to the side of the warship, then stuffing them into the gap to build a wall to support the incredibly heavy behemoth of war. If it was really bricks, this scene might not be so exaggerated. But the things he used as bricks were pirate ships weighing more than 10 tons. Near the port, countless people looked at this scene in shock, having lost the ability to speak. Looking at the war monster that finally stopped collapsing, and the graveyard of ships that were squeezed together, a question suddenly popped up in their minds. This monster, is he really a human? The pirates are also wondering, how many of these monsters are there in the Navy headquarters? He is just a major general. They were both major generals, so why didn't the major generals they had met before have this ability? After stuffing the last small sailboat into the gap, the war monster finally stopped collapsing and Ron breathed a sigh of relief. For the time being, it has stabilized. However, at this moment, this once majestic giant monster was just like Wu Laoer, who had suffered a cerebral thrombosis at the east end of the village, with its head tilted and its butt sticking out, looking extremely ugly. After the warship's balance was resolved, Ron asked the soldiers to disembark and guard the ship, and not to move the warship that was barely keeping its balance. Then he turned around and looked at the still chaotic dock number 1, with murderous intent in his eyes that no longer needed to be concealed. Boom! Floating in the air, Ron was surrounded by a terrifying high-voltage current, and invisible waves spread outward, stirring up a strong wind. Because of the series of actions just now, there was no one in the 1,000 meter radius around the port except for the Navy stationed there. A vacuum zone was formed with Ron as the center. The pressure he brought to everyone in the dock was not differentiated between Navy or pirates. His godly brute force made it hard to breathe. The pirates would rather huddle together and fight the Navy under attack from all sides than get close to where he was. Dante completed his mission well. He seized the dock gate immediately. No matter whether it was pirates or escaped workers, as long as they dared to approach the gate, they would be ruthlessly killed by the Navy. The war behemoth was the flagship of all of them, but it was almost knocked down by pirates. This is a shame that no one in the entire army can wash away. Anyone who dares to bring up civilian casualties at this time must be prepared to die. No further comments. Faced with humiliation, even without the pressure from Ron, Dong would not hesitate to risk his life. Whether it's your own or someone else's. Thanks to Dong's activeness, the pirates were blocked in the dock. The only remaining escape direction was the lumber mill connected to the outside world, except for the port. No one was stupid enough to try to escape in front of a monster like Ron, so they all abandoned the gate and rushed towards the lumber mill. That's Rob Lucci and Keiku. Ron saw Keiku and Rob Lucci fighting the pirates in front of the lumberyard. Both of them were injured and looked to be in a tough fight. Barry, who would become one of the 5 foremen of dock number 1, was sitting with his back against the woodpile, spitting blood and firing a musket to support the two. I see. Gain trust. Ron took a look and stopped paying attention. If he wanted to gain Iceberg's trust, what could be more effective than being seriously injured and on the verge of death in order to protect the timber factory, which was the heart of the dock? CP9 is truly full of talent. It's time to end this farce. Taking a deep breath, the surging high-voltage lightning condensed on his arm, and a ferocious giant lightning python emerged from the air, poking its head from his shoulder, staring coldly and ruthlessly at the front. At the same time, Ron slowly closed his eyes and sensed the life breath of everyone in the dock. As long as he didn't make any large movements, the sound produced by his body would not interfere with his observation haki. Although it was intermittent, he had indeed touched the threshold. 450 men left? Never mind. The battle lines are too tight. Let's just take out as many as we can. Then, Ron raised his hand, and the perception in his mind disappeared instantly. He opened his eyes and, following his memory, threw out the thunder python condensed on his body. Thunder python walk on the ground. Hiss. The thunder python, which looked strangely similar to the white snake of Hell Island, rushed into the ground in an instant, like a drop of water merging into the sea, without causing a single ripple. But then, where the thunder python entered the ground, thousands of small lightning snakes as thick as arms scattered and crawled rapidly along the ground. These small lightning snakes were extremely fast, and in a flash they caught up with the fleeing pirates and roasted them until they were 70% done. For a moment, the air was filled with the strange aroma of cooked meat. What? Oh no! There's an electric current on the ground. It's Major General Ron. The Major General has taken action. Razor's target was everyone except the Navy. Ron couldn't tell who was a sailor and who was a pirate. Anyone who dared to fight the navy would be electrocuted. They deserved to die. Faced with such a targeted attack, the pirates were terrified, while the navy was greatly encouraged. Those who were about to collapse also burst out with amazing strength and fought fiercely. Because they all knew that as long as Ron appeared on the front battlefield, victory was only a matter of time. What these pirates lack most right now is time. In front of the dock gate, Dong looked at the pirates who were wailing and falling to the ground in the lightning and breathed a sigh of relief. His abdomen was bleeding profusely and was barely wrapped up with a strip of cloth. Opposite him, T-Beard became more and more anxious and cursed angrily, "Asshole! Get out of my way! Oh, what do you think?" Boom! Dong stretched out his left foot and stepped down, taking a sumo stance. At the same time, he placed his sword-holding hand on his knee and gasped for air. Even though blood was pouring out, the fighting spirit in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest. Looking at the T-Beard whose eyes turned red with anger in front of him, Dong grinned, spat out a mouthful of blood and sneered. "Want to leave? Crawl under my crotch, you fat pig!" Behind him was the dock gate. Hundreds of soldiers ran out to bring wooden bars and used their bodies to block the gate from the outside. Even if he was killed, the gate would not be broken in a short time. At the same time, their superior, Major General Ron, the super rookie who continued the legend of the three monster admirals of the Navy, has freed his hands. The dawn of victory is about to bloom just like the rising sun in the sky. On this point, Dante had the same idea as ordinary soldiers. Ron is here, victory is here. Chapter 96 Then held hostage. Asshole! Go to hell! T-Beard was extremely anxious. After seeing Ron's extraordinary strength, who would have the courage to stay? He was now almost sober from the alcohol and wanted to escape. However, Dong tightly entangled him and would rather be chopped to stop him from escaping. Now being insulted like this, T-Beard rushed forward with a roar, his long pirate scimitar cutting through the air, making a sharp whistling sound, and slashed towards Dante fiercely. Well done! This move was so fast and sudden that there was no time to dodge. Dong roared, covered the Liang Kaidao with his armament haki, and held it horizontally above his head with both hands. Whoosh! Bang! Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal. Dong only felt that his hands had lost consciousness, and at the same time his chest felt stuffy. He opened his mouth and spit out a large pool of blood. His feet were pressed deeply into the ground, as if they were planted in the ground. What a terrifying strength! It's still amazing no matter how many times I see it. At first, he thought that the T-Beard with a bounty of 50 million Baileys was not much different in strength from the Captain Hook he killed, so he couldn't help but look down on him. But when they really started fighting, Dong realized that the two were simply one in heaven and one on earth. Dong Te thought about it and knew why. The Navy set the bounty based on the standard of the degree of threat to the world government. The strength is only one of the judging criteria, and sometimes even the least important criterion. Otherwise, why didn't the Golden Emperor offer a bounty? Captain Hook committed many evil deeds, including murder, arson and torture. The world government hated him to the core, so the bounty was naturally higher than the standard. However, T-Beard relied on his bravery to venture into the sea, and his brain did not support him to come up with any evil plans, so the bounty was almost completely in line with his strength. If it weren't for the crude power of armament haki, he would have been killed on the spot with that blow. Damn the bounty standard! Cursing inwardly, Dong endured the severe pain in his chest and abdomen and rolled forward on the spot. Laugh! The nearly 1.5 meter long scimitar looked like an ordinary longsword in front of T-Beard, but it was swung with great force. When it fell to the ground, a deep gully immediately appeared on the ground. Is all you can do is run away, little thing? T-Beard was panting through his nostrils. He called himself Uncle T-Beard and dared to seize Whitebeard's territory in the future. He was a reckless man with no brains but courage. He was such an unruly madman. Now he was humiliated by Dong several times. He was extremely angry and the only thing left in his mind was to kill Dong. Seeing Dong roll over to avoid the chop, Cha Huza suddenly stepped forward and kicked out. Although he was a fat man, his speed was quite amazing, comparable to the shaving among the 6 styles. Die to me. Not good. This scene was also beyond Dong's expectations. He could only barely cover his chest with his hands. The next moment, T-Beard kicked him away. Bang! With a loud bang, Dong Te felt as if he had been hit by the Beast King. Blood spurted out from all over his body, and he didn't know how many bones were broken. He was in great pain. Liang's quick sword flew out in a spiral, and it was surprising that he couldn't even hold the swordsman's life. Puff! Major Dante! Major! Stop! Stop him! The surrounding navy were frightened by T-Beard's terrifying power, but Ron's appearance did not make them lose hope. They roared and launched an attack, trying to stop T-Beard. It's so annoying. Get out of here! There were 2 more bullet holes on his body. T-Beard roared in pain, and the pirate scimitar in his hand circled around his body, sweeping the soldiers who rushed over and made them spit blood and fly backwards. After eliminating the threat of the soldiers, T-Beard locked his eyes on Dong who was struggling to get up not far away, and rushed over with a dong 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 sound. Dong Te was seriously injured. The kick shattered his internal organs and put his life on the line. Although he tried to stand up with his face and feet on the ground, his buttocks were raised and his feet were kicked wildly. The hard stone slab made him feel like he was stepping on cotton and he couldn't stand steadily. At this time, T-Beard rushed over, raised his long knife and chopped it on the head. Die! The long sword fell, unstoppable. The morning light shines on the long sword, making the blade as red as blood, and death is about to come. At this moment, Dong found that he didn't feel much fear, whether it was towards the powerful T-Beard or towards death. All he felt was a strong sense of unwillingness, the anger that had never been vented since returning from Hell Island. In an instant, an invisible force surged into his heart. Dong stood up suddenly with a roar and swung his last fist at T-Beard. How can I die here? With the strong vibration of the air, it was like the real armed color domineering wrapped around the fist, and the crisis was born. However, at this time, Cha Huza had to shoot the arrow on the string, and he didn't have time to think too much. Instead of retreating, he advanced with his long sword and chopped it down with all his strength. Boom! Boom! The 2 huge forces collided with each other, and the air exploded like an exploding balloon. The shattered force surged wildly in all directions, plowing deep and bottomless gullies in the earth. The terrifying destructive force left a spider web-like pit in the original place, and for a moment, the air was filled with dust and thick smoke. Major Dante! Captain T-Beard! The soldiers and pirates shouted anxiously, and the strong air current prevented them from getting closer. But neither T-Beard nor Dante flew out with the explosion. It seemed as if both of them were crushed to pieces in this final fight. I don't know how long it took, but a familiar tingling sensation came over me. The Navy soldiers' eyes were dull, and then turned into ecstasy. It's Major General Ron. The Major General is here. As expected, as the tingling sensation appeared, the high-voltage current stirred up a surge that turned into a strong wind, blowing away the smoke and dust. As the smoke and dust dispersed, the situation inside made everyone who was watching this battle hold their breath. It's good that Ron arrived in time, but... Are you kidding? That powerful attack? Blocked. In the center of the field, the strong wind that had not yet dissipated made Ron's cloak of justice flutter in the wind. He turned his left hand into a palm and grabbed Dong's fist. With his right hand, he clamped the big knife that T-Beard had chopped down. The 2 of them fought desperately, and all the power was channeled into the ground by Ron through his muscles and bones, leaving no trace. Even when he did this, there was not even a trace of ash on his face. Simply incredible. That punch is quite powerful. Congratulations, Dante, you finally crossed the level of covering and reached entanglement. You can be considered to have truly mastered the armament haki. In this regard, I am not as good as you. Ron stood between the two of them, turned his head to look at Dante, and his smile was very sincere. Dante twitched his cheeks as a greeting, and then fell to the ground with a limp. The physical strength required to use armament haki was even more terrifying than using the 6 styles with all his strength. He didn't even have the strength to smile at this moment because he had burst out with all his strength when breaking through on the spot. However, Ron did not catch Dante. Under the stunned gaze of countless people, he threw the bleeding Dante away. The expression on Dante's face changed from excitement to shock, from shock to disbelief, from disbelief to anger, from anger to indifference to life in just 0.5 seconds. Then, like a salted fish, he drew an arc in the air, raised the middle finger of his right hand tremblingly, and fell to the ground head first. Duan. At this time, Ron continued to speak. But the first punch you threw after awakening was to hit your own superior. You're really brave, bastard. Soldier. Pirate. Are you a devil? At this moment, no matter whether it was the navy, pirates, or ship workers, all of them were roaring with fangs in their hearts. Ignoring the noisy voices calling for the medic, Ron tilted his head, pinched the blade with 2 fingers of his right hand, and looked at the T-beard who was so angry that his face turned red and his neck was thick that he couldn't move the blade down at all, and grinned, "Hey fatty! Have you considered how you will die if you hit my soldiers?" T-beard's heart suddenly turned cold. Ron's strength was the most terrifying one he had ever seen. In front of him, his strange strength was nothing. He loosened the knife handle and took out a loaded flintlock rifle from his belt. His hands and feet burst out with a dexterity that was totally inconsistent with his body size. In an instant, the muzzle of the gun was close to Ron's forehead. "Don't move. If you move again, I'll beat him to death." Ron. Soldier. Suddenly, the air became quiet. A group of people looked at T-beard with all kinds of strange eyes. They wanted to say "please do as you please," but were afraid that Ron would beat them. T-beard didn't understand their looks. Seeing some soldiers clenching their weapons tightly, he continued to roar, "Hey, didn't you understand what I said? Don't move, get out of my way. You who? I'm talking about you." "I." A short soldier grinned and put down his rifle silently. "Heaven and earth conscience. This is my conditioned reflex. If our superiors are kidnapped and we don't respond but just stand aside and watch, someone will die afterwards." Chapter 97 Monster Ron. With Ron's razor attack, the pirates were defeated. Before he rushed over to rescue Dante, the situation was firmly under control. Rob Lucci and Keiko took the opportunity to rush out of the lumber mill and joined the navy to chase the remaining pirates into a group. When he found the time to look back and saw the commotion here, even though he was as calm as he was, he couldn't help but feel confused and wondered what's going on. "Lucci! Stop being in a daze and go put out the fire." Barry stood up and greeted him. He definitely didn't know Lucci before tonight, but after a fierce battle, the two of them were recognized by him and treated as companions. "Yeah, all right Foreman Barry." Ron took another look at Ron who was being held hostage by T-beard, then gave up investigating and ran to put out the fire with a bucket of water. "Taking Ron hostage? You have a lot of ideas, boy." On the other side, T-beard dragged Ron back and threatened the soldiers who wanted to approach him fiercely, "Don't come over. Otherwise, I will shoot him. Don't move, I know you are strong, but can you block bullets? You know what, it really works." The corners of Ron's mouth twitched wildly, and for the first time he felt a little regretful for using violence to solve problems. His reputation on the sea was all based on newspapers from a few weeks ago, and there were countless people on the sea who didn't know him. Apparently, T-beard is one of them. This is really the case, ignorance is fearless. With a very speechless sigh, Ron stepped down with both feet, and his whole body froze like steel. T-Beard suddenly felt that the hostage in his arms was frighteningly hard, and he couldn't even drag him, and he was immediately shocked. "Don't move! Do you want to die, you bastard?" "Yeah, I just want to die." Ron completely ignored the muzzle of the gun pointed in front of his eyes. He exerted force with both arms, forcibly yanked away T-Beard's left hand that was gripping his neck, and then pulled it down. Plop! Ron's strength was so amazing that T-Beard was pulled to his knees by him. This made T-Beard's pirate temper surge up, and he aimed the gun directly at Ron, with an evil and bloodthirsty smile on his face, and pulled the trigger. "Damn it! Go to hell!" Boom! The bullet flew out and Ron's head exploded. "Whoa-ho-ho-ho! Did you see that? This is what happens when you disobey me." T-Beard's face was filled with madness. He knew that without the hostages, the remaining navy would never let him go. If he can defeat Dante in a one-on-one match, can he also fight his way out of the siege in a one-on-one match against 1,000 people? There was a war in Puke, and the Pirate Alliance had tens of thousands of people. In order to avoid any accidents, Ron mobilized a full 1,300 Navy officers from his headquarters to go out to sea. Even if there were casualties in the battle now, it would be just a drop in the bucket. "Whoa, who?" As he laughed, T-Beard gradually stopped what he was doing. The madness in his eyes was replaced by fear. He looked at the figure in front of him with his eyes wide open in horror. "No! This is impossible! Why aren't you dead? Yeah, why didn't I die?" While T-Beard remained kneeling, Ron put his hands on his shoulders. The wound on his head crackled with electricity and soon disappeared. "As for this question, please go to hell and ask someone else." After that, Ron slowly increased his strength and folded T-Beard backwards. T-Beard's fat body could not provide him with any support at the moment. In front of Ron's strange strength, the whole person gradually bent backwards in a posture that violated the human body structure. There was a click sound, and the spine was split open. Ugh! T-Beard immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyeballs popped out, bloodshot. Feeling the unrelenting force on his shoulders, T-Beard opened his mouth, squeezing out blood foam and internal organs from his throat, and roared. "Ah! Let go! Let me go, you bastard!" Boom! 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 Death was imminent, and T-Beard fired randomly like a madman, hitting Ron. But it was still useless. Natural elementalization was not something that could be hurt by bullets without armed color domineering or made of sea stone. When the bullets were empty, T-Beard's head was almost touching his butt. He stretched out his hands in vain and beat Ron frantically, but the effect was not even as good as bullets. Bullets could at least force Ron's elementalization by exceeding the upper limit of his body's defense with pressure, while Ron would not be hurt even if he directly blocked his fists. "Oh! I don't want to die." Finally, Ron pressed down with both hands at the same time, and a series of explosions were heard. T-Beard finally uttered the word "die," and his whole body suddenly became sore and limp. The great pirate T-Beard, who was supposed to fight the Straw Hat Pirates in the New World in the future, had his spine broken in half, and died a miserable death. His whole body was twisted in a weird posture that would make even a yoga master shake his head in astonishment. The fat on his belly was torn, leaving only a layer of white membrane covering his internal organs. The fat in the layer mixed with blood and flowed down his torso. Ron let go of his hand and slowly stood up, shaking off the grease and sweat on his hands, staring coldly at the corpse, and said lightly, "You should be glad that I don't have time to torture you slowly now, otherwise, if you beat my soldiers, death will only be a kind of enjoyment." A breeze blew by, and the harbor was silent. Countless people looked at T-Beard's unrecognizable body in horror and swallowed hard. "Are you kidding me? Is this just enjoyment?" The soldiers shuddered, but soon a feeling of reverence and enthusiasm burned in their chests. They all stared at Ron with burning eyes and tightened their weapons. That's right. This is our commander, Major General Ron. We are his soldiers. Brothers, follow me and kill. Kill. For a moment, the soldiers burst out with unimaginable enthusiasm and rushed towards the pirates who were resisting stubbornly. Ron looked up thoughtfully and glanced at the mad dog-like soldiers, with a smile on his face. It seems to be working well. In order to become stronger, since he did not choose to become a pirate but joined the Navy, how to be a good Navy member is what he should consider. A good Navy officer is defined by two words, power and force. Li means strength. Ron is very confident in this regard. If he cannot become a top-level warrior even with the Thunder Fruit, just like the useless Enel, then death is death, which only proves that he is just an ordinary man. Chuan means rights. It was a long journey. Establishing prestige among the soldiers was Ron's first step in his plan to ascend to the pinnacle of power. The Navy is a running dog of the world government. Is he a minion who helps the Tianlong people to do evil? So you can't be a Marine? No, no. Only the weak will choose to resist when faced with oppression, the strong will never consider this issue. Because they are the ones who oppress others and are born cannibals. The strong change the world, the weak adapt to the world and the rules set by the strong. This is an eternal truth. Pirates and the Navy, the Revolutionary Army and the world government are the opposition between freedom and tyranny. It seems full of epic atmosphere, but freedom itself. Isn't it the cry of the weak? In the turbulent era of pirates, weren't they just a group of weaklings amusing themselves and deceiving themselves? When they choose to resist with force, regardless of their strength, they have already put themselves in the position of the weak and challenge the strong. From the moment he got up from the hospital bed, Ron vowed to become a strong man. In Ron's eyes, pure resistance is a path that only losers and weaklings would choose. What he longs for is power itself, the impossibility of transcending limits, rather than proving his own strength. The more dirty, corrupt, and unpopular the world government is, the greater the opportunity it presents to Ron. No one has the ability to make him surrender, and he has never surrendered. This is due to the different levels of thinking and the different angles of thinking. From this point of view, Ron is a natural strong man. Because he wants to rule the world. Chapter 98 Killing. Of course, with his current strength and power, he still has a long way to go to rule the world. What he can do now is to establish his prestige in the Navy and move steadily towards the pinnacle of power, one step at a time. No one has ever really understood Ron. Zephyr is only worried that Ron will get lost in the pursuit of power because he is too powerful and incompatible with the Navy's ethos. Garp regards Ron as a reliable junior. Ron's talent and scheming only make him feel that this boy can be of great use and will be a good general. Only when that day finally arrives, perhaps everyone will understand what a monster Ron is. Don't move, kneel down for me. Shut up. I'll kill anyone who dares to whisper. With T-Beard's death, the pirates who were completely frightened could no longer cause any trouble. After the soldiers burst into unimaginable enthusiasm, even Rob Lucci was surprised at the combat effectiveness of the Navy. These ordinary soldiers, who seemed weak in his eyes, were not afraid of the pirates whose individual strength was several times stronger than themselves. Instead, they pounced on them and bit them like mad dogs, and were determined to take them with them even if they died. It was this reckless fighting style that made the pirates lose their courage and they were quickly tied up. Moreover, this crazy style of fighting was not driven or forced by pressure from above, but was a decision made by the soldiers themselves. Just because their superior said that. Major General Ron. Lucci looked at the tall figure approaching with a knife in his arm. The arrogance and confidence he had cultivated over the years disappeared without a trace. That's a real monster. Whether it is strength or other aspects. Report. Major General Ron, this time we killed 376 pirates, captured 178, killed 37 soldiers, seriously injured 23, and slightly injured 137. Please give instructions. The messenger had a bandage on his hand, and the wound that had been simply treated was still oozing blood and blending with the dirt and dust. But he did not lie on the stretcher to rest, but got up and took the initiative to count the losses and results of the battle to express his respect to Ron. Well, thank you for your hard work. Arrange personnel to treat the injured immediately. If there are not enough medicines, go to the Water City to find a hospital. Don't save money for me. Ron returned to his usual calmness, as if he hadn't noticed the admiration in the other person's eyes. But the calmer he was, the more valuable those words were in the eyes of the messenger. This shows that Ron really thinks so, and is not just putting on a show. He immediately yelled and saluted in return. Understand? And many more. But before he turned around, Ron suddenly called him. What's the matter, Major General Ron? Well, there's something wrong with the data. The number of pirates killed this time is 554, and no one was captured alive. At this point, Ron glanced at him sideways and said, "It's necessary to give an explanation to the brothers who died, isn't it?" The messenger's heart trembled. He looked at the pirates huddled together, and nodded with tears in his eyes, "Yes. Killing a pirate and capturing a pirate alive are both equally rewarding, and there is no difference between life and death. However, the Navy has a rule that prisoners cannot be killed after the war, and violating the rule will be punished." Ron made this decision, no doubt wanting these pirates to pay the price for their actions tonight with their lives. He was willing to risk being punished and facing rumors to tell everyone that anyone who touched his soldiers would die. The messenger left excitedly. Ron looked at the terrified pirates in front of him, put his hand on the hilt of the sword, and then put it down. Just when the pirates were relieved and thought he had changed his mind, they suddenly heard something. It's a shame to use Thundercloud's first battle to kill more than 100 pieces of trash. Let's change something else. Then, under the puzzled gaze of a group of people, Ron walked to the shore of the harbor and grabbed the keel of a pirate ship. Wow! With a large amount of seawater spilling, Ron lifted the pirate ship from the sea with one hand and carried it on his shoulders. The tyrannical aura emanating from his body made the pirates instantly understand Ron's purpose, and they shouted in fear and despair. "No! We have surrendered, you can't kill us. You are a Marine. Marines do not kill prisoners. Asshole! You will die a miserable death." The soldiers were also shocked by Ron's actions, but when they remembered what Ron had just said, they all kept silent, took out their weapons, and killed the pirates who were jumping the most happily, so that they could gather closer together and make it easier for the Major General to take action. "Hey, Lucci!" Keiko, who was only 18 years old this year, shuddered, looked at Ron who was walking towards him with his back to the rising sun, and called out softly. "Shut up! We CP9 don't know anything, understand?" Luki hands and feet were numb in front of Ron's undisguised murderous intent, and he scolded him in a low voice. If Ron knew that they knew the information in advance but did not inform him, judging from Ron's current behavior, he would definitely think that he and others will die. Logically speaking, if the CP organization is in need, the Navy is indeed obliged to help them, and no one will be held accountable even if there are heavy casualties. This is determined by the priority of rights. But Lucci did not dare to gamble, and did not dare to challenge Ron's authority with his own life. Or to put it bluntly, he is afraid. He was afraid that the beast, which seemed calm but was actually extremely angry, would tear him into pieces. In this world, strength is the only thing that matters. Walking back amid the pirates' abuse, Ron looked around, paused for a moment at the soldiers who had their eyes closed forever, and then smiled. Boom! He swung the huge pirate ship up, like a war hammer wielded by a giant, and smashed it hard on the pirates with a sharp whistle. Boom, boom, boom! With every smash, the ground was shaking. Blood, bones, rotten flesh, and wood were flying everywhere, and broken limbs and legs were flying everywhere. The scene was like a hell. But no one dared to stop Ron. Regardless of his identity, the price of angering the strong must be borne by someone. Crack, bang. After several times, the hard keel could no longer withstand the terrible pressure and broke into two. Ron felt his hand lighten and looked up to find that the other half of the hull had sunk deeply into the ground and mixed with the flesh of the pirates' corpses. TCH, boring. Leaving behind half of the pirate ship, Ron rubbed his sore arms and turned back to ask. Mayor Iceberg, what's the problem? As the battle ended, Bing Shan and his men pushed open the door and walked in. He saw Ron, who was furious, and was frightened half to death by the violent and bloody scene. At this moment, a broken arm flew out from the pile of corpses and fell in front of him. The broken arm was bloody and the bones were broken into pieces. It was obvious that it was torn apart by a heavy object. The last time he saw such a wound was when a boatman accidentally got his arm caught between two boats. Hearing Ron's question, Bing Shan took out a handkerchief to wipe the cold sweat from his face, trying to make his smile look less ugly. Pirates invaded Dock Number 1, I wanted to come and help, but it seems that the Major General is not short of manpower. There is really no shortage of manpower. No, it's missing. Why not? Ron raised his hand to stop him from talking, and looked back at the Wu Lao Number 2 floating on the sea. Then, covered in mud, he walked over and took the trembling hand of the iceberg quail. It just so happens that we didn't finish talking about that topic last night. Let's continue after breakfast. Breakfast, breakfast. Well. Wow. Most people couldn't help themselves and bent over to vomit, even Khalifa was no exception. But because it was still early, no one had eaten anything, and the acid in their stomachs came out, making them feel even more uncomfortable and wanting to vomit. Bing Shan resisted the urge to vomit and nodded tremblingly, understood. Please leave it to us. Chapter 99, Set Off. Target Pucky. 2 days later, the Sea Train 7 Water City Terminal arrived at the blue platform. Major General Ron, most of the pillar replacements will be completed soon, but according to your request, the external hull modification needs to be completed in one go. Even if we put all our manpower into it, it will take at least half a month. The speaker was Iceberg, who stood beside Ron nervously. Behind him were officials from the Seven Waters, Foreman Barry and others, who were as pale as him, and they all shrank their necks for fear that Ron would notice them. Ever since Ron violently killed the prisoners in front of everyone the day before yesterday, these people didn't dare to even think of disobeying him. In their eyes, Ron is a real devil. Extremely cruel. But Ron didn't care about it. What he needed was prestige, not friends. It was better to be feared by others than to be unknown. Don't worry, you have plenty of time, Mayor Iceberg. Ron smiled faintly, then raised the corner of his mouth and whispered in Bing Shan's ear, after all, there are tens of thousands of pirates attacking Puke. It's not that easy to kill them all. Gilu. Bing Shan forced himself to smile, yes, yes. Then I would like to wish you a successful start. When you return to the Water City in the future, please allow me to hold a banquet for all the Navy officers and soldiers. Banquet? It's just an excuse to give out red envelopes. Well, thank you, Mayor Iceberg. Very satisfied with Iceberg's success, Ron patted him on the shoulder and turned to walk towards the train. Ron had no psychological barriers to extortion. Not only was he more powerful than others, but the way he handled the matter was already enough to favor Water City. A hole was blown in the Navy headquarters warship docked at Carrera Company's Dock Number 1 by pirates. Ron has the right to arrest and interrogate all the relevant personnel, including the Iceberg. Now he just wants him to bleed a little to help him rebuild the warship. Ron feels like a saint. If he hadn't considered that he didn't know how to repair ships, Iceberg's good days would have ended from today. The member states are not equal to the world government. To put it bluntly, they are just a group of subordinates who are ruled. The Navy headquarters is the most powerful and violent agency with the largest number of personnel under the world government. It represents the face of the world government. If you provoke them, even the member states will suffer the consequences. They take the initiative inside and outside. So no matter how unreasonable Ron behaved, Bing Shan could only accept it. He even felt a little happy when he saw Ron getting in the car. Very good. Finally got rid of this plague god. Behind the crowd, Lu Qi, who had just been recognized by Bing Shan, remained silent, just staring at Ron's movements and silently clenched his fists. He recalled the conversation Ron had with him last night. You know about T-Beard's surprise attack on the Navy, right? These were Ron's first words. Help me keep an eye on the warship and keep your mouth shut. This is Ron's second sentence. Just two simple sentences, but the amount of information contained is so terrifying. Rob Lu Qi, who was always known for his cruelty, was instantly horrified, and his fear of Ron increased by 3 points. At the same time, he made up his mind that even if the world government came to inquire about this incident, he would know nothing. Blue Station, platform. A green steam train is parked on the platform, ready to head to St. Poplar, the city of the Queen of Spring. Due to the pirate invasion in Puke, the current situation is unclear, so even though the area where the terminal is located is still under the control of the Puke Kingdom Army, the sea train has also modified its route and only goes as far as the city of the Queen of Spring. If Ron and his crew wanted to go to Pucky, they needed to first arrive at the city of the Queen of Spring, and then change the locomotive and pull the last few carriages carrying the Navy to Pucky. In order to wait for Ron, the sea train that was supposed to depart at 11 o'clock made an exception and stayed at the Blue Station for more than 3 hours. Some passengers were already full of resentment. What's going on? Are you going to leave or not? That's right. I made an appointment to discuss business with someone. If something goes wrong, can you afford it? I'm so sorry. Please be patient, the train will leave soon. The flight attendant was trying to comfort the passengers with sweat on his forehead, but he had said this line countless times and the passengers simply couldn't hear him. Asshole! Do you know who I am? I am a special envoy of the world government. How dare such a big shot make us wait for him? I'm very sorry. This is an order from the mayor. Please wait a moment. Who does your mayor think he is? I'm an official of the world government. Let him come to see me. As soon as Ron got on the train, he heard a noisy noise. A government official dressed in a black suit was arguing with the flight attendant. The other party was of high status, so the flight attendant could only act like a grandson. In the past, they would definitely set off without saying a word, but Bing Shan was very popular in the Water City, and they were even more reluctant to disobey orders. Tisk, what a troublesome fellow! Waving his hand for the soldiers to start getting on the car, Ron walked over and patted the man in the black suit on the shoulder. Who? This was a short middle-aged government official, with 2 tall bodyguards standing beside him. Having been in a high position for a long time, the man felt someone tapping his shoulder and turned back impatiently, yelling, "Do you want to attack the officials of the world government? Come on, bring me, Ron had some impression of the official in front of him. In the original book, because the high-level officials of the world government changed their minds, it was better to control the ancient weapons in their own hands instead of worrying about them coming out. He represented the government to negotiate with Iceberg many times to find out the whereabouts of Pluto. His name was very unique, so Ron remembered it. As for how unique? Corgi, right? Ron lowered his eyes and looked down at him. You seem to have a lot of objections to the Navy's requisitioning trains to transport troops. It seemed that they were cooperating with Ron. The soldiers who had just experienced a bloody battle the day before and were now full of fierceness walked through the middle of the aisle carrying guns and ammunition, heading for the empty carriages at the back. The passengers on both sides who had been noisy just now chose to shut up and look straight ahead. No. No objection. Corgi was shocked. Ron could actually call out his name? Although he is a special envoy, it doesn't matter in the end. Ron even knows about him. Doesn't it mean that the other party has spies in the government? Even has a backstage? In an instant, the Corgi was sweating profusely and forced a smile with embarrassment. So it's the Major General who needs troops transported. Sorry, it's my fault for being too excited. Corgi quickly expressed his friendliness. In addition to the speculation about Ron's background, it was also because the Navy was not some godson who was nothing if he was away from the five elders, but had a high status and unlimited power in the world government. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the five elders to establish rules strictly prohibiting the Navy from interfering in the internal affairs of member states. Therefore, the identity of a naval general is considered a big shot even in Marijoa, where powerful people gather. Not to mention that the shoulder straps on Ron's body represent the headquarters of the Navy, and he is a real powerful figure. Government officials just sounds a little more prestigious. Apart from a few who truly stand at the pinnacle of power, who dares to compete with the Navy. At least such a thing exists. Ron definitely doesn't have a corgi. That's good. I thought someone was going to interfere with my mission. Tisk, what a pity. Ron shook his head with regret. What the hell is pity? So you want to kill me? Corgi's back was instantly wet with cold sweat, and he almost cried with laughter. Yes. No, Major General, it's me who deserves to die. Please let me go. The Corgi almost fell to his knees. Interfere with the headquarters Navy's mission? This is a capital crime. Apart from the three admirals, the only ones who can mobilize general-level officers of the Navy headquarters to carry out missions are the powerful Navy Marshal, Buddha's Sengoku, and those with higher status than Sengoku. For example, the five elders, the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Kong Steelbone, the mysterious Chief of CP0, and the World Nobles Celestial Dragons. Well, no more. Just a few. This allowed the generals to prioritize their missions when carrying out their missions without any worries. Anyone who interfered without authorization would be convicted and imprisoned at best, or killed on the spot at worst. If an ordinary government official dares to provoke us, he will be arrested and beaten. There is nothing wrong with the procedure. Even if you return alive, you will be punished. If you don't die, you will be skinned alive. The five elders delegated power to the Navy, but they did not let them sit around and sulk. A cat that catches a mouse is a good cat, and a good cat has privileges. In the past 6 months, the Navy has overshadowed the intelligence organization Cypher-Pol. These government officials who are good at political maneuvers certainly see it clearly, so they are not stupid enough to stand out and become targets. TCH, boring. After teasing the Corgi, Ron spread his hands under the Corgi's confused gaze. Okay, in that case, pay the money. Corgi, meow meow meow. Chapter 100, Sudden Enlightenment of Observation Haki. In the name of mental damages, Ron got a huge amount of compensation from Corgi, and he happily continued to arrange the soldiers to board the train. After the soldiers were arranged and the train departed, Ron asked each team to pay attention to their own discipline, protect their weapons and medicines, and then return to the luxurious single room prepared for him by Bing Shan and buried his head in the bed. Ah! I'm so tired. Normally, he didn't think much of it when he saw Dong arranging the work, but now that he was personally involved in every detail, Ron realized how complicated it was to manage a troop. The scheduling and arrangement of the eating, drinking, defecating and urinating of more than 300 people was really extremely complicated. Fortunately, the sea train could not transport all the soldiers at once, and the main force set off early, otherwise Ron thought he would really be exhausted to death. After taking a few breaths, Ron suddenly got up, knocked on the partition, and shouted, "Dante, when will your injury heal?" Next door was Dante's room. Apart from him, the highest officer, only the wounded Dante had the privilege of living in a room alone. As for everyone else, go back to the carriage and sit on the bench. Soon, Dante's very unhappy complaints came from next door. Come on, Major General Ron, not everyone is a monster like you, okay? My bones are broken so they need to grow back. It doesn't look like what I said. Could it be assembled? Isn't it just faster? Ron pouted, but that wasn't the end yet. Dante wouldn't stop complaining once he started. Besides, I'm seriously injured. Seriously injured, you know? I should be recuperating in the Seven Water City instead of accompanying you to the war. No, you are a soldier, you must have the honor of a soldier. Ron said seriously. Hey? The glory of a soldier. The glory of a soldier you're talking about is blackmailing government officials. What? How did you know? Did someone tell on you? Ron was shocked. Don't worry about it. And the fact that you killed the prisoners, this matter cannot be concealed. I want to see how you explain it when we get back. You are not afraid of death, but I am. Also, do you know what your reputation is in the Water City now? People say you are a monster and can eat people. Oh my god, you are a marine. And the damage to the warship was concealed and not reported. You know %, and you in %. Overall, waking up Dante was a mistake. Ron listened to the endless complaints in his ears with a blank look in his eyes. Killing prisoners, warship accidents, and so on. They are all small things. Ron was sure that no one had the courage to go out and talk nonsense, whether it was CP9, Iceberg or anyone else. So while Dante was gossiping, Ron began to concentrate on his body and practice his observation haki. After finalizing a series of renovation plans with Bing Shan yesterday, he called and told Zifa about his situation. The answer he got made Ron both depressed and happy. Normal people can't hear the sound coming from the body. Even if they learn observation haki, the focus of listening is only on the outside world, not on their own body. In other words, ordinary people will not encounter this situation when practicing observation haki. They are crossing the river by feeling the stones. Once they learn it, they can use it. The sound of the body itself will not cause interference. Only those who are gifted in observation haki will be disturbed by various sounds and unable to maintain their observation haki. This is because after they awaken their observation haki, their initial level is completely different, and their starting point is directly different from that of ordinary people. An unfamiliar form of perception appears, which is far beyond the control level of beginners. This makes their habits or instincts receive two similar but completely different sounds at the same time due to the body's bone conduction, resulting in an indistinguishable sense of disharmony, which is automatically judged as abnormal by instinct, thus interrupting the effect. At this point, the answer is clear. Ron was at a loss whether to laugh or cry because he realized that it was not because he had no talent that he could not learn it, but because his talent was too strong. Fortunately, the Navy has been passed down for many years and has a solution to this situation. First, slowly suppress your instincts and try to adapt to the world after mastering the observation haki through repeated attempts. Just like threading a needle or selling charcoal, it is just a matter of proficiency. Of course, the speed of this method varies from person to person. Some people can adapt in a few days, while others need a year or two. The second is to do the same as Ron is doing now and actively avoid the sounds he doesn't want to hear. It all depends on talent. Because in terms of technique, the latter is several times more complicated than the former. It is an essential and advanced skill in the use of observation haki, and it is also the only way. But at the moment, Ron is more suitable for the second method. He blocked Dong's words, and his eyes seemed to stop working, staring blankly ahead. In his mind, a sheet metal carriage was constructed, followed by 2, 3, and the scope became larger and larger. The colorless sea water and air currents kept hitting the carriage, allowing Ron to see clearly. In the picture, he sketched out human-shaped objects one by one, some were walking, some were chatting, the frequency of heartbeats, the screws trembling when the train made a clanging sound, everything appeared in Ron's mind out of thin air. People were in the carriage, but they could overlook everything within a radius of 100 meters. Ron was immersed in this unique perception and was unaware of the time. Suddenly. When do you think Major General Ron will wake up? I don't know, but don't worry, the Major General should be practicing. Hey? Being in a daze is also considered cultivation. You don't know this, do you? How could a powerful figure like the Major General practice in the same way as us? Hey! Tell us about it. Ahem, this is so, this is so. Swish! Ron snapped back to his senses, the brilliance returning to his eyes. Gilyalu. The stomach contracts and secretes acid. Wow! Platelets flow through your blood vessels. Creak creak. The periosteum between the joints makes a rubbing sound. Is this observation hacky? Ron turned his head and looked at the blue sea. In his opinion, the sea was no longer peaceful. In addition to the waves, countless fish and shrimps were swimming under the sea. They hunted, fought, and reproduced. All kinds of sounds entered his ears, allowing Ron to see clearly. Donged had someone move him to Ron's room at some point, and when he saw him wake up, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "Have you awakened your observation hacky?" "That's right." Ron nodded, stood up from the bed and closed his eyes. "However, due to the physique of a lightning man, my observation hacky not only has an exaggerated range, but in addition to perception, it can also collect vibrations from far away through radio waves and achieve monitoring. From now on, you can call me a humanoid monitoring den mushi." "That's really, congratulations." Dong smacked his lips, realizing that even if he awakened his observation hacky, he couldn't do the same level of monitoring den mushi. But he pushed the cold food on the table and smiled. "But you haven't eaten for 24 hours, aren't you hungry?" "Ron, meow meow meow. No wonder it's still daylight." It turns out that it wasn't just a short time that passed, but a full 24 hours had passed. Humans judge time mainly from the brightness of light, and there is naturally no such concept in the world of hearing. It was not until Ron completely awakened his observation hacky that the sound merged with his instinct, and the strange feeling of incoordination disappeared, triggering a chain reaction that he finally woke up. Yesterday, when Dong was having dinner, he received a notice from a soldier that Ron's door did not respond no matter how he knocked. He asked the driver to take out the spare key, and immediately found Ron's abnormality after entering the room, so he immediately arranged for someone to prevent outsiders from approaching, and at the same time he also guarded Ron's room. If he hadn't made the judgment, Ron would definitely have been disturbed by the soldiers who were worried about his safety. Perhaps he would still have awakened his observation hacky, but the process would definitely not have been so smooth. That state of enlightenment, once broken, cannot be sustained and can only be encountered by chance. Damn it! I mastered armament hacky before you, but it was defeated so quickly. After eating and drinking, Ron picked his teeth and smiled at the unwilling Donged. "Don't worry, it's just an observation hacky. Soon I can also learn armament hacky." Donged. "Someone, help me back to the house." "Yes, Major Dante." A bowl of poisonous chicken soup choked Donged to death. Ron leaned back in his chair and continued to practice his observation hacky. He didn't know if it was because his body actively blocked Donged's voice when he entered the state of enlightenment, but he found that if he didn't concentrate, Donged was actually not within his perception range. "You have to take the initiative to follow him." "I'm not gay." Ron complained and tried hard to practice and overcome this problem as soon as possible. End of this chapter. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.